There we go. This is June 8th. Agency review, and then we're going to do agency in a real estate brokerage. Okay, so general agent, multiple tasks, more than one, not unlimited. Let's go. Special agent. A special agent has one job, one task: sell my house or property, find me a property, find me a tenant, or find me some space. That's it, one job. If you listed a home for sale, you're the listing agent. The seller said, Paulina, I want you to sell my house for me. And then a buyer comes along and the buyer says, Paulina, you could represent me and the seller at the same time. In the world, in the eyes of the law, that's two separate transactions. You represented the seller and the buyer. Every single transaction is two transactions. Does everybody see that? I'm not talking about sale. I'm not talking about dollars. I'm not talking about it's only one house that I sold. No, it's two separate agency transactions. One is representing, remember, agency is not about money. One is representing the seller, one is representing the buyer. That's two separate agency transactions. One sale, two separate transactions. Does everybody understand that? A single transaction, a single sale is representing a buyer and representing the seller, representing the landlord, representing the tenant. One transaction is a special agent. If somebody asks you to sell their house, that's one job. As soon as you sell the house, your job is finished. If you're a property manager and you're a general agent and you put a tenant in, your job's not done because there's going to be another unit and you're going to have to get a tenant again. You might have to evict a tenant. Somebody's going to call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and say there's a leak. You're going to handle that leak. That's another job that you have. You might have to hire the plumber. You might have to hire the guy to clean the windows. You're going to evict tenants. You're going to have to, a tenant moved out and the bathroom is trashed. You're going to have to hire a contractor. Those are all jobs that you're hired to do as a general agent. Special agent got one job. Everybody understands that. Agency coupled with interest. That is a licensed person representing themselves. They're buying, selling, or renting for themselves. That means you are always the agent and you're always the client. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm reviewing again from last night. You're the agent and the client in the same transaction. Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
Joe, you decide to go buy a house for yourself. You're the buyer, which makes you the client, and you're the agent. It's called agency coupled with interest. Please feel free to ask questions. Why my thing's not moving? Okay. So, universal agent, again, power of attorney. All decisions, all matters. General agent is a property manager that got multiple tasks, not one, more than one, but not unlimited. Special agent, one job: sell, buy, or rent. That's it. No other jobs. Agency coupled with interest. This relationship is the same person, so you cannot separate yourself. Natasha, if you're buying a house, you're the agent and you're buying it. Can you possibly not be the agent and not be the buyer?
No.
No, you have to be both. So agency coupled with interest cannot be revoked. You cannot fire yourself or remove yourself from that. The only way that would work is if you did not have a license and you let it lapse. Then you're not an agent coupled with interest because you're not an agent anymore. If your license expires, then you're just an individual citizen consumer. But as long as you're a licensed agent, no matter what, you are agent coupled with interest. And we must tell the world that we are the agent and the client. Agency, we said, legal way to start and create an agency relationship is in writing. Okay, that's called express. Or we have implied agency. Implied agency means that we've done the action. I've given you the advice. We're acting like agent. You ask me questions, I give you the answer. What should I do to get my house sold? Here's what you should do. How much is my house worth? Here's how much your house is worth. How long you think it'll take it to get sold? Well, based on the information, blah, 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 it's going to take you about 90 days to get your house from day one to close. All that information creates agency. You're acting like the person's agent. When you ask questions and you answer questions that are asked of you, you're going to create agency. Here's my little badge. See my little badge right here? I wear that on my shirt, on my jacket. When I'm out, got my little badge. Most agents, I recommend whenever you go, wherever you go to work, you're going to get a little cute little badge like that with your company name on it and wear it everywhere. You're in the supermarket, you're online, Paulina, and you're buying some groceries and somebody sees your badge and they go, oh, you're in real estate. No kidding. I live on Cherry Street. How much do you think my house is worth? Don't think it doesn't happen. People ask you stuff all the time. Really? You live on that block? No kidding. You want to know how much it's worth? Let's go take a look. I don't know exactly without looking at it. Well, don't you know? You're a real estate professional. Aren't you from the area? Absolutely from the area. Yeah. Well, how much is my house worth? Well, I really can't tell you that. Number one, you might be working with an agent. I'm just giving you the for instances. You might be working with an agent already. And it's irresponsible of me to tell you how much it's worth without actually seeing the house. Does everybody get how that's completely irresponsible to say that? That's like telling a doctor, hey, doc, you know what? I'm sneezing like crazy and I've got a rash all over my body. Here, take this medication. Do they do that? They go, no, I'm going to run some tests first. I'm not going to just prescribe something. What if something get a bad reaction? I'm going to do some tests. I'm going to ask you some questions, and then I'll prescribe something. So you have to get to the house. You got to get some information. We got to peel the onion layers back to find out what's going on and make sure that they don't already have a relationship with another agent. That's the most important part. You're giving away information that you're not supposed to unless you have it in writing, and B, you could be violating agency because someone else already has that relationship. Okay, next, we talked about implied agency last night. We said you ask for gas, guy gives you a tank of gas and he says, $100 please for the gas. I did not agree to give you $100 for a tank of gas. I'm not paying you. Yes, you are paying. You're going to either wash the floors, scrub the toilets or something, but you're going to pay for that gasoline because you asked for a product or service. It was given to you that ratified the agreement. You're expected to pay for it. I didn't sign anything. I have nothing in writing. I don't need it in writing. It's an implied contract. It's an implied agreement. Everybody understands that. Same thing when you order food in a restaurant. It's an implied agreement. I ask you for food, they bring you the food, and just expected to pay for it. You've ratified it by accepting it. You're expected to pay for it. Okay, remember that guy? That is not an implied implied agreement. That is express. Burger King will not just hand you food. Anybody ever go to Burger King and you order food and they just hand it to you first and they go, okay, you owe me $9. No way. You pay first, then you get the food. That is an express contract. You're paying first, then you get the service. Because they're not sure you're going to pay for it. They're not sure that you've got $75 in there for your 7 Whoppers and how many Happy Meals. They want to make sure you get paid. Okay, so agency, express in writing or implied, which is not legal to be implied. We are creating an illegal situation by answering questions and offering advice unless it's in writing. Okay, and in writing, we said it has to be at first substantive contact. You must disclose, by the way, you need to know before I answer any questions that I would be representing you as an agent. Most people are like, what? I'm in the supermarket. I just asked you a simple question. I got to sign papers for you to tell me how much my house is worth? Yeah. New York State says yes, I do. Can you give them the information? No. Legally, you can't. Do people do it? All day, every day. Is that a legal transaction? No, it's an illegal way to handle it.
Sure.
You're supposed to
Could I
get
charge him?
in writing. Okay. So compensation. We also said yesterday that the source, where the money comes from, does not determine who you represent. Remember that? I'm going to go back to my white screen here. New share, whiteboard. Okay. Remember we did that? Last night we had Aunt Shirley. Shirley says, I'm going to pay somebody $20,000 to get my house sold. Remember that? $20,000. Shirley says, I need my house sold. I'm going to hire you to sell my house. Natasha is the listing agent representing Shirley to get the house sold. Right, Natasha? Natasha sells the house herself, is entitled, her broker, not her, is entitled to $20,000. Natasha tried to sell it herself, and after a couple of days, no buyers showed up. So Natasha says, hey, multiple listing service, all the other agents out there that are working with buyers, I will offer you a finder's fee. I'll split some of my commission to any agent from any brokerage that brings me a buyer. Okay, so Joe comes along. Buyer's agent, going to put apostrophe there. Joe's a buyer's agent. Joe says, I got a buyer. My buyer is approved. Love the house. We'll take it. Everybody follow so far?
No.
Who is paying Joe?
Shirley.
Shirley is paying Joe. Indirectly, Shirley's paying Natasha's office, and Natasha's office is giving some of their commission over to Joe's broker. Everybody got that? So Joe is not getting paid from his buyer. That doesn't mean that Joe doesn't represent his client and their best interest. Does everybody understand that? Source of compensation does not determine representation. You don't represent somebody because they're paying you. You represent them because they authorize you to represent them, whether they're paying you or not. And in most cases, they are not paying you. The listing agent is going to pay you. Everybody understand that? Any questions on that?
Yes, when you split a commission with an agent, does that have
Yeah.
to be in writing as well too?
It is in writing. It's in the multiple
No.
listing service, and I'm going to show you exactly where that is.
No,
We're
no,
going to go in the
separately.
MLS later.
You're the buyer's agent, and you and another agent are working together as a team.
Yeah.
Technically, as a team, right? But they're
Right.
two different offices. It
No,
could be the same office.
I'm
Natasha
saying-
could be.
I'm
Sorry.
saying separate from that. So I work with, I'm teaming up with another agent in my office.
Right.
She says, if you find a buyer or whatever, we'll work together and we'll split the commission. Does that need to be in writing? Or, I'm working for her, I'm helping her out, open houses and doing legwork for her, and she's gonna give me a piece.
If you're on their team,
Mhm.
that's between your team structure. There are some teams that the people on the team get hardly any money.
Okay,
Yeah, that's between you and your team leader.
gotcha.
If you're helping out and doing an open house and she made the sale, you might get $100 every time she makes a sale, depending on what your agreement is.
Gotcha. But does that agreement have to be in writing or just verbal?
Usually in the office, team agreements are in writing.
Okay.
Right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can the seller can decide how much commission is gonna pay? You say Shirley is paying 20,000. Can she decide she's paying 20,000 or less than that or more than that, or
It's always negotiable.
negotiable?
I just
okay.
picked 20,000 as a number, but
Mhm.
Natasha might have said, hey, my office charges $20,000 to get your house sold. And
Mhm.
Shirley could say, I'm only willing to pay 18.
Oh, okay.
That's up to Natasha and Shirley to work that out.
Okay.
All right.
Wait,
Might want to
Oh,
start
so
at
you-
50,000 and end up at 20. Yes, Natasha.
So, Natasha and Joe will be signing a disclosure form
with their clients,
with their
not with
clients,
each
but I
other.
wouldn't.
You're gonna
Yeah,
have one from your seller.
Mm,
Joe's gonna have one from his buyer.
Okay, because so we'll just agree that we'll split it from Shirley. There's no form of writing saying like, if I
I'm
don't
gonna
give
show
you.
you now. Here's what we're gonna do.
Okay.
Let's go somewhere else now. Hang on. Good questions. Good questions. Let me share screen again. Great questions. Let's go here. We're going into the multiple listing service right now. I'll give you a bird's eye view. Hey, where did it go? Hey, what are you talking about? Wrong one. Okay, this is the multiple listing service. And here is the dashboard for what's called a matrix. This is where all the multiple listing, when you see a house on Zillow or anything like that, it originated from here. So let's just go take a look at new listings on the market today. And let's just pick any one. Let's find something good here. Let's look at something for $1.3 million in Astoria. Can you believe that? $1.3 million, this piece of junk right here is $1.3 million in Astoria. Gotta love this job that we have. Okay, so the property's listed for $1.3 million, and all the way on the bottom here, it says buyer's agent commission 1.25%. That's what we're getting. You bring the buyer on a $1,350,000. I like this part, my favorite part of the job. 1,350,123 times 0.015. Pretty cheap, but it's $20,250. So you know in advance. You don't have to sit there when you go to show a house and say, hey, listing agent Anthony Skoros, how much you plan on paying me of your commission? Now, we don't know if this guy took a commission for 8%, 7, 6, 5. Just because it's 1.25 doesn't mean that he took a 2.5% commission. He could have took whatever he wants, and he wants to keep as much of it as he can. So he's only giving out 1.25% commission, but it's in writing right there. There's no guesswork. We already know how much the listing agent is going to share with you for bringing the buyer. Everybody understand that? That's where we go. So we're looking at this listing. Want to make an appointment for it, go to showing time and just make an appointment. It's pretty cool how we do appointments. You schedule on here and you want to schedule a single showing. You pick the time you want to show it. I want to do it Saturday at 12 noon. You pick the time. If I hit request, they're going to get a text on their phone saying Joe Barada wants to show your property Saturday at 12 noon, and they'll get it on their phone. They hit yes, a Y for yes, and I'll get a text back. Congratulations, your appointment has been approved, or no, and they'll either give me a new time or tell me I can't go. Right? It's very cool, very interesting how it works. And that's how easy it is to make appointments on here. You read the description, 2-family, side yard. That's why it's so much money, even though it's a piece of junk. Currently used by a contractor parking dump trucks. Needs TLC. That means it's falling apart in different terms. Okay, so
Wait, I have a question really quick. Sorry, Joe.
yes.
Are we going to go over brokers, agents?
Are we going to talk about broker agents?
Yeah, because that's
Eventually
confusing to
today.
me. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why, you have a broker agent situation in your office?
No, I've actually never seen one, and that's why.
Correct.
Because I was actually
I've never
filling
seen
out.
one in 23 years. I've never
So
seen one.
I was actually filling out buyer paperwork, and I do this every single day. But you know how you can say you select as a buyer, and then buyer's agent, and the broker's agent. And then on the MLS all the time, I see that like some people, like we just saw, you know, there's a broker agent commission that they're giving
That's a
out.
mistake usually.
Okay.
They don't.
Yeah, because I've just
most
never
of the
seen
time
that. So I
it's a
didn't know if we had
mistake.
like had to learn that for the test. And I was like,
Yeah. Well, when they check off broker agent, most likely the broker didn't check their work before they submitted it, because they're not offering out broker agent. They're offering out really just buyer's agent.
Okay.
Right? When you check it off, you're only checking out buyer agent, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's all you're really offering. We don't want any relationship to the transaction, but that's in chapter 3. So
Okay.
we'll get to
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
All right. So everybody understands where the money's coming from does not determine who I represent. So in that description that I said, Joe doesn't say, hey, buyer, I'd love to get you a great deal on this, but you're not paying me. The seller is, so I'm going to work in his best interest. It doesn't work that way. The person that hired you to be their agent, that's who you represent, whether they're paying you or not. Everybody understand that part? Okay, great. So there can never be an issue by getting it in writing, which is the legal way to do it. No one can come back and say, I didn't have any idea that you were representing me. I didn't know you were representing me and the other person, or I didn't know you were representing them and not me. It cannot be vague. It has to be crystal clear who you're representing in the transaction. We did that one, beat it with a dead horse. Okay, so fiduciary duties we talked about yesterday. This fiduciary, a person or organization on behalf of another person, put their client's interests ahead of their own with a duty to preserve good faith and trust. It is the high level of trust. When you ask your agent, your fiduciary, to do something for you, you are trusting them to work in your best behalf. You're asking your attorney, hello, attorney, I need you to get me off. They know you're guilty. They got to get you off. You ask them to do stuff for you, they got to do it. When you have a financial planner who's also a fiduciary, insurance and life insurance, financial planning, you're giving somebody, here's my life savings. I want you to put this in the stock market, make me lots of money. They don't put it in the product that gets them the highest commission. They put it in the product that's supposed to get you the highest return when they're shopping for you. You're putting all your trust that they're not going to lose your money. Everybody got that? Okay, great. So the fiduciary represents the client, and the third party we said is the customer. That's a repeat again. So the fiduciary duties, what are those duties, Joe? What am I required to do for my client? The duties are care, confidentiality, loyalty, obedience, accountability, and disclosure. Starting with care, we're supposed to be an expert at all of these things. We did it last night, so I'm not going to do it again. Watch the video. Reasonable care or care. Confidentiality, we said that the confidentiality never ends. Even after the transaction is done or we're no longer their agent, we do not divulge any information that has been given to us confidentially, okay? Except for, that's the exception, is defects. Defects in the house. That we can't hide. They're buying a product. They don't need to know that if you don't sell this house in 30 days, you're going to lose your job in California and then you're screwed. So if I don't move and get my kids registered and move to California in 30 days, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to have no money. You can't tell that to the buyer because that gives a buyer an unfair advantage. So that stuff you got to keep secret no matter what. It'd be easy to just say, hey, buyer, I happen to know that this guy's desperate. Let's just throw a low number at him. He's got to take it because he's got no other offers. That's illegal, okay? But if there's termites or there's a buried oil tank or there's some sort of foundation crack, the roof leaks every time it's even humid out, and they tell you, don't tell that information. You are required to give that information out to the other party, okay? Latent defects are required to be disclosed. Loyalty, your client tells you to do something, you're supposed to work in their best interest, and you're supposed to do what they ask you to do. Obedience, again, they ask you to do something, you're supposed to do it. Okay? Obedience, we said, however, you're supposed to do whatever your client says, but it can't be an illegal request. They can only ask you to do legal stuff. Okay? Somebody says, do not allow any people from this religion, this color, this nationality. I'm not selling them a house. Don't even bring them here. That is illegal. Okay? Can't do it. Can only do legal stuff. They can't ask you to do, they can ask you, but you can't do it. When somebody asks you to do something illegal, you need to bring it out on the table. You need to inform your broker that your client asked you to do something illegal. Because if somebody's going to get in a lot of trouble, it's going to be you, but it's also going to be your broker. Hey, broker Joe, my client just told me that they're not going to sell it to anybody who's Irish. They're not going to sell it to any Irish people. Guy hates Irish people. He's not going to do it. That's illegal. You need to bring it to your broker's attention, and your broker needs to cut a letter out to them and say that you're committing a fair housing violation, which can cost you your house. You could lose every dime you ever had. Okay, very important. Accounting or accountability, CC load, care, confidentiality, loyalty, obedience, accountability. We're supposed to be responsible for any money that somebody gives us, whether it is a client or a customer. We're accountable for money. We have to maintain all documents in a real estate transaction for a minimum of 3 years. Any money we do collect has to go into a separate escrow account. It's not our money. Okay, using that money or depositing it into a personal account or a business account and not an escrow account is a violation. I'm going to tell you a story. We had a client. I went to a closing, and this guy was a closer. He used to be a very prominent attorney. And accidentally, on a Friday, he deposited the $30,000 down payment into his personal checking account. Business account, not his personal account. His business account, not the escrow account. Happened to just pay his rent for his office. And then Monday morning go, oh my God, I realized I made a mistake, took the money out and put it into his escrow account. He lost his license to practice law in all 50 states. Cannot be a lawyer ever again.
How did they find out?
The bank notified him. Banks monitor escrow accounts like you have no idea. I'll give you another example. My dad was selling a house early on when I got my real estate license. He was selling a house in Long Island, and I represented him. I went to the closing, and my dad said, you could, might as well use one of your new lawyer friends, big shot realtor. So I brought one of my lawyer, who happened to be one of my instructors in the real estate class. And my dad he had done closings before, but he just happened to be sitting there, and there was a check. Most of the checks that he got were certified checks, but one of them was a check from her escrow account for the balance. It was a couple of $1,000. And he was just kidding around, and he knew how it worked, but he just said, hey, these checks are all good because they're bank checks. This one's from your checking account. How do I know it's any good? And she said, because if that check bounces, I will lose my license and I might even go to jail. And I said, really, Judy, you would go to jail for that? She said, well, if it's an escrow account and I'm supposed to be holding other people's money in that account and I bounce a check, what does that mean? You gave me $10,000 to put in this account for safekeeping, and the check bounced when I go to give it back to you. What does that mean?
What?
It means either I spent your money or I don't manage it correctly and I overdrew the account. Both of which are illegal when it comes to escrow accounts. Escrow accounts, that money is considered cash. If somebody pays you a check from an escrow account, that's good as cash. That's just like a bank check. If that thing bounced, that attorney's losing his license forever. Moving right along. Finally, CC load, the D in load is for disclosure. Disclosure is the act of releasing relevant information pertaining to a transaction that can influence a decision. Anything that needs to be told to the other party or anyone is a disclosure. Okay, so what do we have required to disclose? Representation, who is representing whom. If you're self-dealing, that means you're an agency coupled with interest. We have to disclose that. For those of you that weren't here last night, I'm going kind of fast because we did this already. So I'm just reviewing, and you can watch the other thing. I explain every one of those in detail. Okay, if you breach fiduciary duties, I violated one of those required duties that I have to my client, I can lose my commission. I can lose my license. If I lose my commission and there's penalties against me, the penalties are 4 times the amount of money I was supposed to get in a commission. Either I received it and filed a complaint afterwards and they found me guilty, I got to give it back plus 3 more times. It's 4 times the commission. So a $10,000 commission is a $40,000 fine. Everybody get that? There's going to be a question in the test that's going to say, Mary was found to be guilty of violating her fiduciary duties. Her commission was $3,572. How much was the penalty? 3,572 times
4.
4. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Okay, so now what do we owe the customer, the third party? Fiduciary obligation, CC load, that's for our client. Well, what about the other customer? What about the customer, the person on the other side? We are supposed to give them reasonable skill and care. We're supposed to be fair and honest. If there's something wrong with the house, we're required to tell them. And if they give us money, we're required to manage that money correctly. Okay, that's it. We don't owe them anything else. You're a customer. Okay, great. What about the principal to the agent? What does the principal owe you or the client? What does he owe you? Absolutely nothing. Owes you nothing. He's the consumer, you're the agent. If he gave you wrong information, they could take you to court. Because if something happens and somebody says, oh my God, we found the house is full of termites. And the seller says, don't sue me. I told the agent there was termites all over the place. Well, did you? Did you cover your tail? Did you ask all the questions? Did you get it in writing? Hey, Mr. Seller, I'm about to list your house. By the way, is there a buried oil tank here? No? Okay, great. No oil tank. How about any termites that you know of? No, no termites. Any mold conditions? Does your roof leak? Does your basement leak? How old is your roof? Blah, 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 and all this stuff. And you write it all down and you give it to them and say, sign here, please. This is correct. Make sure it looks good. So now afterwards, if something did happen, by the way, 23 years, nothing ever happened, but just saying, if it did happen, it's kind of like car insurance, doesn't matter until somebody has a problem, then you need it. So somebody comes out and said, oh my God, I told Joe that there was termites and he knew that the basement flooded every single time it rained. He didn't tell you? No, you told me it didn't. It didn't. See, is that your signature right here? That's what you told me that day, that it did not leak, it didn't flood, there's no bugs, there's no whatever. So we are required to make sure. Agents have been held liable for these different items on here. So if you don't get it in writing, all these different things, a whole bunch of questionnaires. Any broker that you work for is going to have a list of questions for you to ask the seller when you're taking a listing to make sure that you've got yourself covered. So if something happens afterwards, and is it possible that the roof leaks 3 days after? How the guy says the roof never leaked. 30 years I'm living here, the roof never leaked. Is it possible tomorrow we get such a rainstorm that your roof leaked, that your roof starts leaking? Natasha, is that possible? The roof never leaked in 30 years. Is it possible that it rains tomorrow and you've closed on the house today and tomorrow that roof starts leaking?
It could be possible.
Totally possible. Roof could start leaking anytime. Could be 1 year old or 30 years old. Could start leaking anytime. So if it did leak and you said it didn't, you lied.
Professor,
Somebody's got to prove you lied or didn't lie. Yes.
I have a question. Does that same token apply to permits? If you buy a home and you find out that the whole basement is illegal and there was no permits, who is liable for that? Is that the agent?
If you're buying a house, you hire a title company to make sure that everything's legal.
Okay, so that's not the responsibility of the agent. The agent is just to tell you whatever it is that the seller told you.
Right, so if you're getting a mortgage, you don't even have an option. The title company, the bank, is going to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the house. So whether it is or not, the title company is going to go find out, is that basement legal? If somebody came in afterwards, when we do title and closing costs, we'll get more into it. But if somebody came and you go to sell the house a year later and they do another inspection and it turns out the basement's illegal, you call the title company and say, hey, you sold me this house and you told me that everything was legal in here. You guaranteed it. That's what title insurance does.
Okay, I see. All right, I just wanted to be sure.
Great.
Wait, Joe, before you go forward, you said so, if the buyer didn't disclose to the agent, that there was something wrong with the house, they are not held
The
responsible.
seller. If the
The seller.
seller finds out, if the seller didn't tell me, and
Yeah,
there's
the
only
seller,
one way
yeah.
to prove it,
Mhm.
because the seller says, I did tell you, Natasha, I told you when you took the listing that there was, 5,000 bats living in the attic. I told you. Just because when you went to look at it wasn't there, but I told you that.
So you have
No.
to do, what do you
So
have
you
to do?
need to ask questions when you take the listing. And do you have any kind of animals living in the house? Any rodents, any raccoons, any kind of live stuff in the house that you know about? Nope, nothing going on here. Great. You got it in writing. The new buyer comes in and they go up in their attic at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're swarmed with 5,000 bats, or worse, they're sick because of bat poop is very, very hazardous to breathe that stuff. They would come back and say, I told my agent, I told her that I had bats up there. She didn't tell you? Not my problem. Go sue her. You need to prove that he told you that. And the only way to do it is ask lots and lots of questions and get it in writing and get him to sign it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Stigmatized property, though, we discussed that if the house can't make you sick or there's something about the house, we're only selling a product. If somebody died in the house, we're not required to disclose that somebody died. Oh, there was a suicide in the house. The guy killed himself, whatever. We're not required to disclose that information. Okay. 1995, they ruled out, don't have to disclose it. Open house. We're still talking about representation. During an open house, you can only represent the seller. So when somebody walks in the door, they start asking you about the house. Can you please tell me about the house? You don't have to say, well, before I do that, you need to know I'm representing the seller here, sign here. It's the only time we don't need a written disclosure form because it is assumed that you're representing the seller during an open house. Okay, next. Compensation. We said compensation, money. When do we earn our commission? When a ready, willing, and able buyer and a ready, willing, and able seller have a meeting of the minds. That means I'll take it. Okay. Next, in order to receive your commission, you, me, my company, anything, my license, the broker, has to have it active at all times from the beginning of the transaction until it closes. My license has to be active. You, the agent, Natasha, you work in my office and you've got a deal going on and you were so busy, you didn't renew your license. I legally can't pay you your commission. Your license has to be active from the minute the transaction starts until it closes.
And you
Okay?
said if the broker's license is not valid in between, none
If
of you
the
guys.
broker, like if I let my license ends on October 2nd. If I don't renew my license, every single transaction in my office is null and void.
Until you renew it, right?
No.
October
If it lapses during a transaction, I'm not allowed to get paid on that transaction.
So who would it go to? Nobody?
There's no fee. I can't charge a fee.
Oh.
And if I don't have a license, I can't even represent my client. I certainly can't get paid.
Yeah.
Okay. Agency, we created it either in writing or implied. Implied, we said, is not legal. So now we can terminate the agency as well. If the broker, not the agent, because it's not your deal, it's my deal. If the broker dies or becomes incompetent, there's a lot of old people in real estate. If they're incompetent, or the owner dies or becomes incompetent, terminates the agency relationship. If the property is completely destroyed, not a car crashed through the garage, that's repairable. If the house is destroyed, like gone, like Hurricane Sandy came in and the house is flat, it's gone, that terminates agency. There's no more listing, there's no more structure. Okay. Bankruptcy of either party, broker or the owner, or the agency, you hired me to sell your house. I didn't sell it. The contract ended. We no longer are client and agent. We can both agree to terminate it. The broker can terminate it, or the client can terminate it anytime. Or,
Joe, I just have one quick question.
Yeah.
Here. How does one renew their license? Is it just like,
you get
go
notified
pay a
from the
fine?
Department of State
Okay,
at least 4 months before your license expires,
okay,
and your broker gets notified.
got it.
So
Thank you.
not only do they notify you by mail and email, but your broker gets notified by mail and email that Victoria's license is up in 4 months. And I take that email and I forward it to you. And then I'm gonna get
Oh.
another notice in two more months. And then after that, if you let it, you should just, minute you get that notice, go renew it.
But I'm saying I would have to go onto a website and
You go
pay.
onto the same website. Once you log in to apply for your salesperson's exam,
Yeah,
that same username and password you're going to need for the rest of your life, because every 2 years you're going to have to go on with the same username, same password, and renew your license.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. Antitrust.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yes.
It's Paulina.
Mhm.
So the username and password is for the, like, you said that you're a notary too. Will that username and password will work for like when you're renewing it? Because it's the New
As a
York
notary?
State. Yeah, but it's the New York State licensing department.
Yeah, but notaries, you have to go to the county clerk where you got your notary license from. I just
Oh,
renewed
okay.
my notary.
So this New York state
just did it.
license is different. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
the state of New
All
York. Well, I'll show you on the website as well. We'll go on there. All right,
All right.
antitrust. These are federal laws to protect businesses. They're called antitrust laws. So antitrust laws have been in place. They actually enforce or protect businesses from unfair practice. So if Coca-Cola thinks that Snapple is a competitor, they can't say Snapple's no good, it's a piece of junk, it's poison, don't drink Snapple. They're not allowed to do that. So what did Coca-Cola do to get rid of the competition? They bought Snapple. They buy every company that's in their way, but they can't say anything bad about you. They can't say, don't buy Snapple, it's poison. They can't do anything to affect other people's businesses. In the real estate world, we have antitrust laws, and there are violations that are set. And the 4 acts that are violations in the real estate world are price fixing. Price fixing is illegal. It affects the consumer. Hey, everybody, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call all the other brokerage firms and say, I got a great idea. Hey, you Coldwell Banker and Century 21 and Weichert and Rand and everybody else, let's all charge 7% commission. Wow, that's a lot of money. That's cool. But if we all charge the same amount, that'll be the new fee, and everybody's got to pay 7. We'll all make money. Everybody's going to be happy. Price fixing is a federal crime. Okay, these are all federal crimes, not something that the New York State or your county is going to come give you a fine. This is a federal crime. Price fixing. Group boycotts. Hey, you know what? There's a new company over there. They're charging. They're like a discount brokerage firm. Nobody show their homes. Don't let their agents come into our properties to show them or sell. We'll make them go out of business. It's a group boycott. That's illegal. Market allocations. You stay over there. I'll stay over here. You don't come on my side. I don't come on your side. Maybe if you're in the garbage company, garbage business, and you're in the mob, you can do that, but it's illegal either way. Tie-in arrangements. I'll let you buy this house, but you got to use my attorney. You got to use my mortgage guy. You got to use my title person. If you don't use these people, you're not getting this deal. That's illegal. Antitrust penalties. The first fine, $350,000 in fines to an agent, plus sit in jail for 3 years. These are federal crimes. The brokerage can be fined up to $10 million, and then additional fines from those other people. I'm not doing the quiz again. Okay, break time. How we doing so far? Everybody okay? Everybody
Yes.
following?
Mhm.
It was quick for those of you, we took 4 hours last night to do the same thing we just did in 1 hour. So it was very quick. I'm going to pause the. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Chapter 3 already. 23 more to go. Queen Sammy coming back in. All right, so key terms. We're going to learn the purpose of the disclosure. We kind of covered that. As I said, they didn't have any extra material and increased the hours of the course. So we're going to learn some of the forms. We're going to actually see the forms now, what they look like, and the different forms that are required. It's not just one disclosure form. So this agency disclosure law, there is a form that we have to fill out. It's called an agency disclosure form. And that agency disclosure form must be provided at first substantive contact. Okay. It is a simple form. It
All right,
says
I'm
what,
here, by the way.
what's that?
I'm here. You said you couldn't see me. Now am I here?
I still don't see you though, but that's okay. Whatever. I just got to go.
Okay.
We'll deal with it if we have to deal with it. All right. So this sample form, when I first started, agency form was on a 8.5 by 14 piece of paper on one side. All that information was jammed into this little teeny lettering. It didn't say it wasn't a contract. Just imagine handing that to somebody and say, okay, before we walk in the door, I need you to sign this. People would look at it and go, you got to be kidding me. I'm not signing that. I don't know what it says. The letters are real tiny. It was in a lot of information that sounded like legal terms. It looked like a contract. Everybody had a problem signing it. So they revamped it in, I don't even know what year, 2011 or something like that. And they said, okay, so here's the new form. The new form is on 8.5 by 11 because nobody uses the legal long forms anymore. The 8.5 by 11, it is required to be on one document, one piece of paper, or one continuous document. You can't just give somebody a signature page and sign here if it's not attached to the front page. Because what are you actually signing on page 2 is the definition that you understand what a buyer's agent is, a seller's agent, a broker's agent, a dual agent. You need to understand what those things are. So did I start recording again? I didn't. I am recording, right?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Okay, great. All right. So this agency disclosure form is required for the sale or rental of residential properties, 1 to 4 family units, condominiums, and cooperatives. What is the purpose of this form? It's not a contract. It is informing the consumer of their agency relationship. That means who you are to them in the transaction, the relationship. Are you a client? Are you a customer? Who are you? And what your choices are. You actually have a choice. No, I don't want you to represent the other person. I want you to represent just me. They wouldn't know that if they aren't presented with this form and it is used or presented at first substantive contact. Okay, so we have definitions. Page 1 has definitions on the top. This is not a contract. I'm not signing anything. Okay, well, this isn't a contract. This protects you, consumer, from me. This protects you from me, and it lets you know that I'm representing you in your best interest, or I'm letting you know I'm not representing you. I'm representing the seller. Therefore, I'm not going to ask you any questions, nor can I answer any technical questions for you because I'm not representing you. That's what we just agreed here. So you kind of have to explain it to somebody. Don't just give it to them and say, here, sign here. Although most people could care less. They really could care less. All right. So this disclosure form on the back was provided to me by, and you put your name there. The name of the brokerage firm goes in that form. Okay. If you're representing the buyer, we're going to check off buyer. You're a buyer's agent, right? The buyer's agent you can't just sign it. You got to put the client's name here because most signatures, we can't read what it says anyway. So the client's name goes here. It's the signature of the buyer, and there's the buyer's signature. If you've got more than one buyer and you're taking out a husband and wife or a family or whatever, you put all the names of the people that you represent on here. Okay. In the event that you're representing the seller, you check off a seller's agent. If you're taking a listing, now this form was revamped again in 2015. Why did they revamp it again? Because in the past, if you took a listing, you told the seller when you took that listing, I am a seller's agent, and you checked it off here, and I am representing you, and a seller checked it off and they signed their name. What does this mean, Mr. Seller? I'm representing you only in this transaction. So now I go and put a sign on my front lawn, on the front lawn, don't I? Yeah, put a sign on the front lawn. I'm advertising everywhere. And somebody calls me up. Patricia, you called me up and you say, hey, I saw your sign on the front lawn of this house. I would like to see it, please. I might want to buy it. Do you have an agent? No, I don't. Would you like me to be your agent? I can represent you in this transaction? Sure. Okay, now the old way before 2015, I had to go to the seller and say, seller, one of my buyer clients wants to see your house. That means I'm representing you and my buyer at the same time. Are you okay with that? Yes, I am. Okay, great. So now I have permission to be a dual agent. Buyer, Patricia, I'm going to be representing you as a buyer's agent, and I'm already representing the seller. Are you okay with me representing you and the seller at the same time? Sure. Okay, great. So I've got permission from both parties to represent both parties. I'm a dual agent. Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
As of 2015, I don't have to keep going back to my seller and saying, okay, I got a new one. Can I show him this property too? Yes. Okay, great. Sign again here, dual agent. Now I can go one time to my seller when I take the listing and say, Mr. Seller, in the event that one of my buyers wants to see your property, is it okay if I represent both of you? Sure, great. Then I am advanced informed consent to dual agency. My seller gave me permission to bring my clients here, and I can represent my buyer and the seller at the same time. Okay, everybody understand that? Kind of got an idea what I'm talking about? Anybody not a clue what he's saying? Okay,
I
so
have a question.
yes.
Can two agents can they represent one buyer
Two agents in the same company?
in the same company? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because remember, if they're agents in the same company, let's say you work in my office.
Uh-huh.
You, Joe, and Natasha all work in my office.
Uh-huh.
That listing and those buyers, they're all mine.
Okay.
So you can all work. Everyone in the office can help those clients because they're all my clients. They're not your clients. They're mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Which means everyone in the office is working for me, which means you're a dual agent or you're an agent of everyone in my office.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Every listing. Okay.
Okay.
So that's a good point, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So we have now advanced consent to dual agency. So now what if your seller says, wait a minute, when I'm taking the listing, no, I don't want you to represent me and the buyer. I only want you to talk to me. I don't want you to talk to the other buyer. Okay, well, how about, Mr. Seller, that I represent you and Natasha is going to represent any buyer that comes along. I'm not going to talk to the buyer. I'm only going to deal with you. Natasha will deal with any buyers that come to me directly. I'm not going to talk to them. Me and Natasha are going to negotiate, but we're not talking. I'm representing you. She's going to represent the client theoretically. Is that okay? That's better. Okay, good. So now we have advanced consent to dual agency with designated agents. I'm only going to represent the seller, and Natasha's only going to represent the buyer. Natasha's not going to talk to the seller directly. I'm not going to talk to the buyer directly. Okay, so it's kind of like two different agents. However, it's still in-house. So we're still dual agents because the listing isn't Pedro's listing and Natasha's buyer, they're still my buyer and my seller. So you're always a dual agent. Anytime you sell a property that's listed by your brokerage, you're a dual agent.
I have a question. What happened when the buyer has a representative that is not from your agency?
That's perfect. Then there's no relationship to the
No
buyer
relationship.
at all.
Yeah, they can communicate between agents only.
Just agents, right? It's like
Okay.
lawyer to lawyer,
Okay.
agent to agent, lawyer to lawyer. So what
Mhm.
we're doing is we're really making this illusion for the seller that two different agents are representing them.
Okay.
You're representing the seller, Natasha's representing the buyer, but you're in the same company. So theoretically, we're still dual agents, but
Mhm.
you're not going to discuss anything with Natasha, client, and Natasha's not talking to the seller. You
Mhm.
guys are like the middleman, like two attorneys, but it's the same office. So you're still dual agents.
Mhm.
All right.
When you
So
said that
Pedro-
term, what
I'm
was
sorry,
that
go ahead.
term? I'm sorry, Joe. You said that term was called advanced
is-
consent.
Advanced informed consent to dual agency with designated agents. All right. So right here it says if dual agent with designated sales agents, Natasha is appointed to represent the buyer and Pedro is appointed to represent the seller. And you're going to write that down on that form and the seller's going to sign it so that they know Pedro is the only one going to talk to the seller and he's not going to talk to the buyers. Natasha's going to talk to the buyer. She's not going to call up Pedro's seller directly.
Okay.
Nor do you discuss it in the office. So you can't find out, Pedro, hey, my seller, he's got to get out of here. He's got a bad heart and he needs to move to another state. He's got to move down south because his health is a terrible condition. You cannot tell that information to Natasha.
Mhm.
Natasha's working as if she's in another company, but she's not. So it's really tricky. It's got to be really careful that you handle these things correctly, because otherwise you can easily get sued for violating those fiduciary obligations. Remember, you're supposed to be confidential, and so is Natasha. But it's all in the same office, right? Pedro, you took a listing all the way up in, I don't know, Bedford. Natasha's taken her client from Yonkers all the way to Bedford. She doesn't know your seller. Has no idea. She doesn't even know who you are. The office is so big. There's so many people. She doesn't even know you. Natasha's in the same office as you, but she never met you, doesn't know your seller. Her buyer wants to go see your listing. It's still dual agency
Okay.
because it's not your listing, it's mine. And it's not her buyer, it's mine. So
Mm.
that's still my buyer and my seller. It's dual agency. Does everybody
Okay.
understand that?
Can you repeat it again, please?
Okay, good. I'm glad. I'll do it again. Pedro took a listing. Natasha, you've got a buyer. The both of you work in the same office. Doesn't have to be my office, any office. You work for Keller Williams. Pedro's a Keller Williams agent. So are you, Natasha. Same office.
Mhm.
Pedro took a listing all the way up in Patterson, New York. It's past Bedford.
Mhm.
He took that listing. You only do work like in Yonkers. Your client wants to go look at Pedro's listing up in Patterson.
Mhm.
It's the same office, but you don't know Pedro. You never met him. You don't know his seller. Pedro doesn't know you and doesn't know your buyer, but you're still dual agents because Pedro's listing is not Pedro's. It's a Keller Williams listing. Your buyer is not your buyer. It's a Keller Williams buyer. So your buyer and your seller are still dealing with dual agents because you're both representing.
The same
They,
broker.
they both belong to the broker, not you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Does everybody understand that you're a dual agent?
Yes.
So Joe, question.
Yes, Joe.
So this form is for the seller or dual agent. And now you have the buyer and the
And
buyer
buyer's going to
says-
sign one also.
Okay, a separate one or the same
Separate
one?
one.
Okay, got it.
They sign every single client or buyer or customer has to sign it. So if you're
So
if it's your listing and you're meeting Pedro, you took a listing and a customer walks in the door at an open house and wants to buy your listing. Say, okay, you need to know I'm representing the seller here. Do you understand that? Great. You're signing, they're going to sign as a buyer, but they're signing that you are a seller's agent. So the buyer knows they're not being represented. You're representing the seller. As long as the consumer knows who you're representing. That's why this doesn't protect me. This isn't a contract consumer. Hello, buyer. This isn't protecting me. This protects you from me. That's the part that agents don't get. They don't even bother getting this thing signed because they don't know how to explain it. They need to explain to the consumer, this doesn't protect me. This protects you so that you understand who I am in this transaction, whether I'm representing you, the other guy, or both of you. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right, so that's agency. Before entering the property, that's what a substantive contact means. Before entering the property or before anything of substance is discussed, we have to have this thing in writing. Anything else is an implied agency. Okay, great. There, oh, should have pressed the button. There it is, a little bigger, so we can actually see what it says. And basically, the seller's agent, there's a definitions on there. Nobody reads this thing. Buyer's agent, a definition of a broker's agent, a dual agent, or dual agent with designated sales agents. It's all on there. Your name, name of the brokerage. If it's the buyer, seller, buyer's agent, broker's agent, we're going to discuss that because Reese wants to know specifically what a broker's agent is, and you're all going to know what a broker's agent is. So this form is there for all real estate transactions, even though the law says it has to be there for the sale of 1 to 4 unit residential properties. This relationship, in the beginning, they said, you know what? People that are buying shopping centers and office buildings and strip malls, they don't need to know this stuff. They actually ruled that it's advised, not required. It's advised in all transactions, not just 1 to 4 family homes. It's in all trans. So if you're selling a shopping center, we really should protect yourself by telling the owner of the shopping center, I'm representing you in this transaction.
So Joe, as a real estate agent, you can sell residential and commercial, or do you need
Same
something-
license,
Same license.
same license. You can do whatever. Yeah.
What about businesses? Like you know,
Businesses don't need a license for a business unless there's real estate related to the business.
Okay,
Like if you're buying a business, but it comes with the property,
right.
then you need a license.
Okay.
But people do ask us to sell businesses all the time. Okay. Let's see, what do we have here? Real property law, we don't really care. The timing, we do need to know that it's at first substantive contact. And then there's always going to be a time where somebody refuses to sign the paperwork. Somebody absolutely refuses to sign the paperwork. In that case, we have this thing called a disclosure affirmation. The disclosure affirmation is this person refused to sign the paperwork. They don't want to sign it. I'm not signing it. I want to see the property. I want to buy it. I'm not signing it. I'll buy it. I'll sign the contract. I'll put the money down. Here's my pre-approval, but I'm not signing anything. At that point, you need to make a decision. You need to make a decision. And am I going to allow this person to see the property, or am I going to say, nope, sorry, I'm going home? Not letting you in. We're not going anywhere until this form is signed. That's between you and the rest of the world, what you're going to do. But there is one option. I had this happen once. I got referred to, somebody came from Pompano Beach, Florida. One of the vice presidents of Deutsche Bank was referred to me by a person that I know. And he said, my friend's coming up. He came up, I picked him up from LaGuardia Airport. We had already a few homes that he had picked out, all over $1 million homes. And this was many, many years ago. So it was a lot of money. I picked him up. We went to look at the property and I said, we're going to have to sign some stuff as soon as we get there. And he just completely ignored me. We got to the house. I said, as soon as we get in the kitchen, you need to sign some paperwork. So I pull out the agency form and he said, I'm not signing that. I'm a lawyer. I'm not signing it. So now I got to make a decision. Do I let this guy look at the house? Or am I going to say, I'm taking you back to the airport, get out? So I decided, because he was referred to me, I said, you know what? I'm going to take a shot with this guy and I'm going to let him see the property. The very next morning, I filled out an agency disclosure affirmation, which says that the client came before me and refused to sign the form. Then I went over to the bank that I deal with. I went to Chase, walked over to my banker, and I said, do me a favor, notarize this for me, please. And that was in place of a signed agency disclosure form. One or the other has to be in that folder.
Okay.
Either an agency disclosure form. Now, if you're audited and every single client has a disclosure affirmation, they know you just don't, you know your job. You're not explaining it. But once in a while, you're going to get somebody and you're going to take a chance and say, I'm not going to lose this deal because this guy's not going to sign the papers. So that's the only option you have. Either
that
a signed
covers-
disclosure or this affirmation.
So that covers you then.
That covers you, that I presented to them and they refused to sign it.
And
It
they don't
happens.
need to, they don't need to sign this. You need
No,
to
they
sign-
don't sign it. The agent signs it and then you have to get it notarized.
Got it.
And it's got to be filed. So you file it in the folder, say, here, broker, this guy refused to sign agency, but here's the disclosure affirmation, notarized. All right. Now I can't notarize it for someone in my office. You're not allowed to notarize something when you're a part of the transaction. I can't notarize something. So somebody else has to notarize it for me, even though I'm a notary. You're not allowed to notarize your own stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Everybody follow me so far? Okay,
Yep.
great. So all documents, including these disclosures, must be maintained for 3 years. It used to be because of the Paper Reduction Act that you were allowed to throw away stuff after 3 years. It's not good business to get rid of any paperwork. So we are legally now allowed to scan it as a PDF and then you can go ahead and get rid of it. Because how long do PDFs last?
Forever.
Forever. I got every file of every single transaction I ever closed on. We scanned everything and shredded all the paper. I can go back to my very first transaction. They're all there. Every single one I've ever done, all on file. And it's that big. Okay. We did that already. Talked about advanced consent to dual agency. So now handling cooperative sales. That's not selling a co-op, by the way. A cooperative sale is what Pedro talked about before, is I listed a property, ABC Realty, someone from another company brought the buyer. What kind of relationship does the seller and the buyer have, the agents, when they're from two different companies? None, no relationship whatsoever. I'm representing the seller. A buyer from another company is bringing their client to look at my property. The two agents have no relationship whatsoever. That's called a cooperative transaction. Okay, that's a good transaction where the buyer and the seller don't know each other, just like a lawsuit. Two attorneys on either side of the room, their clients over there and the seller's clients over here, right? That's how it works. When it's a cooperative transaction, those are the least likely to have a problem. The only time we're going to have a problem is when there's dual agency and agents can possibly discuss private information in-house. Okay, so in this single seller agency, that means you're representing the seller. The seller, the client, is represented by the broker, and all the people that work for the broker are sub-agents of the seller. I am the agent of the seller. The people that work for me are sub-agents of the seller. They all represent the seller, but through me. Need to hear that again, Natasha?
Yes.
Anybody else want to hear that? Okay.
Yep.
I represent the seller is represented. The seller hires a broker to represent them. Me, Joseph Parada. The seller hires me to represent them. But they didn't call me. They called you, Roseanne. You're the agent. You went over there and took the listing. Whose listing is it? Mine or yours?
Yours.
It's my listing, right? I represent the seller. I am the seller's agent. Follow? The agents that work for me are sub-agents of the seller. They're an agent of mine, which makes them a sub-agent of the seller. Got it? The seller directs me. I have the fiduciary relationship with the seller. My agents have a relationship with me, but they're representing the seller through me. They are sub-agents of the seller. Everyone in my office represents the seller because I represent the seller. They're sub-agents. My agents in my office, my agents are salespeople. They represent me, I represent the seller. So you're a sub-agent of the seller.
Mhm.
Following
Okay.
me? Okay. So when there's a single seller agency, the buyer is always the customer. We have no relationship to the buyer. Pedro took a listing. Natasha, you brought the buyer and you're in a different company. You have no relationship. So everyone, you and the buyer are our customer.
Mm.
No relationship whatsoever. If we're representing the buyer and the seller in the same office, they're both clients. Remember that? They're both clients. Somebody walks in your store, what's he called?
Customer.
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 So somebody walking into my store to buy my listing, represented by another agent, even though they're represented by an agent, but they're not one of my agents, that's a customer. If you're representing the buyer, Natasha, you work for a different company and you're representing the buyer. Your buyer is your client. The seller and those agents are your customer. You represent them. The person you represent is your client. The other party is the customer, regardless of who you represent.
So when they do finalize, let's say the sale, each party will be getting their commission through
Forget
either the
commission.
seller.
Forget
Oh.
commission. Let's not
Okay.
talk about money. This is
Okay.
strictly representation. Agency has
Okay.
nothing to do with money. Keep that in mind. This is strictly you're doing your job representing your client, who's the buyer, and you're in a different company. So everyone on the seller side is your customer.
Okay.
Got it? If
Yeah,
you're
no, I just
representing
wanted
the
to ask you that.
seller,
I just wanted to ask you that question because of the disclosure form. I just wanted to know if we had to sign the disclosure forms within each other.
no. No, you're representing your buyer
The se-
client.
You get
You're
what I'm
getting
saying?
disclosure from your buyer. The seller
No? Okay.
agent gets it from the seller. We don't swap those.
Okay.
Okay. Great. All right. So now we have other types of alternative agencies. MLS, multiple listing service, is a collaboration. We just saw when we went on to the MLS that we would take a listing and we offer this thing called a finder's fee. It's a buyer's agent compensation. How much are we going to offer to a buyer's agent who's not related to us if they bring a buyer in? How much are we going to offer them? So we're sharing the commission. Okay. So there's different types of sub-agency that we could create. We don't want to create. Now, remember, the broker is responsible for the action of all the agents under him. Right? We said, I'm the agent of the seller. All my agents that work for me are sub-agents of mine and the seller, right? You represent me and I represent the seller. Sub-agents. So we have this thing called sub-agency. We don't want other brokerage firms to represent the seller as well. There are other situations. Let me get to the next slide and we'll probably get this. So seller, sub-agency. A broker accepts a listing. The broker is the seller's agent and all the salespeople are sub-agents of the seller. Okay. Sometimes an outside broker could be a sub-agent of the seller also. I could offer out sub-agency. When would I offer out sub-agency? So I want to co-broke with another brokerage firm. Let's just say that I took a listing and it's out in the Hamptons. My office is in Tarrytown. I took a listing in the Hamptons. How am I going to service a listing in the Hamptons? Anybody have a clue? How am I going to service a listing in the Hamptons? It takes 4 hours to get there. How would I do that? How about Montauk? Somebody wants to sell his house in Montauk. How am I going to take that listing? The guy knows me and he says, Joe, I want you to list my house. Great. $4 million bucks. Happy to do it. How am I going to show that every single time somebody wants to see it? I really can't. So I call up, hey, Bob from Bob's Realty out in Montauk. I would like to co-broke with you. Let's do this deal together. Let's get this property sold. I'll split my half of the selling side commission with you. You advertise my property with me and we'll get this thing sold. So I'm collaborating with another brokerage firm. All the agents in that office now represent the seller as well, which means I'm responsible not just for the people in my office, but I'm responsible for all the people in the other office as well. Does that make sense? We're all representing, me and Bob's Realty out in the Hamptons, are all representing the seller. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? We're both, because they're all sub-agents of the seller. Do I want that? It's hard enough to be responsible for the 91 people in my office. Do I want to be responsible for those? How about if somebody walks in the door down there and the brokerage firm that I picked is some hoity-toity brokerage firm, and some person that's not necessarily a desirable person as far as they're concerned. Like, oh my God, it's one of them. We don't want one of them in our neighborhood, and they discriminate. I'm responsible for that discrimination, and so is the seller. It's as if the seller told me, I don't want any of those people in my house, and I'm acting on that behalf. Meanwhile, I don't even know those agents out there. So I might not necessarily want sub-agency, because I'm responsible for the actions of all these agents under me. So we have this thing called broker's agent. In a broker's agent, I can direct people under me to not represent the seller or myself. So now I'm going to call that same guy out in the Hamptons, and I'm going to say, hey, Bob's Brokerage, I would like you to co-broke this property with me. We'll split the commission, but you don't represent me or my office. So now if one of their agents discriminates, it's not on me and it's not on my seller. The seller is not liable for the statements or actions of that other brokerage firm, because we did not give them sub-agency, we gave them broker agency. Reese, does that make sense?
I don't know
understand?
why I'm having a problem with this, but yes, I get it. It's just confusing.
Yeah. I have never, ever in 23 years offered out a broker agent. Never done it. And when I see it in the MLS, early on when I started teaching this, I used to call brokers up and say, you got broker agency or sub-agency on your listing. Like, they checked it off and they put the information across the bottom, and the brokers were like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Because if you have sub-agency in there and somebody does do something illegal, you're responsible for it, because you've offered out sub-agency to other brokerage firms. So the difference is, I've got agency. In my office, all the agents under me are sub-agents of the seller. I'm the agent. The people under me are sub-agents. I don't want them from someone else. I can't take my agents to say you're sub-agents, because they're agents of mine. But if I involve any other brokerage firm, I don't want them to have a relationship to me, which would make me responsible for those agents and something they do. What am I talking about? Responsible. Like I said, somebody does something illegal. If you do something in my office and you work for me, it's as if I gave you direct instructions to do that. So if you happen to be a very prejudiced person and a person of color comes to look at a house and you go, you know what? I don't want that person living in this neighborhood. I'm not going to show them the house. I'm going to tell them it's not available. You just broke the law. But guess what? The law says, Reese, you work for me, so I gave you instructions to not show anybody that house. Even worse, the seller said, don't bring anybody. That's how the law sees it. Even though you took it upon yourself, Reese, to go and discriminate, the law says Joe told you, and not only did Joe tell you to do that, the seller told Joe to tell you to do that, even though we know nothing about it. I'm still responsible for your actions. It's not easy to be a broker. Everybody wants to get a broker license and say, I'm going to have my own brokerage firm. You're responsible for the actions of every single person in your office. Anything they do, you're responsible.
So wouldn't you want broker's agency then? Because then you're really
But not
covered.
for your own people. You can't offer broker agent for your own people. You can only do
Oh.
it for if you're involving another brokerage firm.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
Got it? And
Okay.
when am I going to do that? I'm not going to give a listing. I'm not going to call up your office in Scarsdale. I'm in Tarrytown. It's a 15-minute hop. I'm not going to call you up and say, hey, you want to help me sell this listing? What do I need that for? But if it's out of my area, or you might be in a neighborhood, I might not be really specialized in Scarsdale.
Mhm.
And maybe Scarsdale's a neighborhood that I don't really know much about. And I say, Reese, you want to do this one deal with me? We'll do this deal together. Let's co-broke. We'll split everything's a lot of money in Scarsdale. So let's just split it. I need to give you broker agency because I don't know what you're going to do in your company, or anyone else in your company says, ooh, Reese got this great listing. I'm going to go show it.
Right.
I don't want them living in Scarsdale. Oh, can't have that. So we're not going to show it to them. I'm
Okay.
responsible if I gave you sub-agency or if I just cooperated with you. If I gave you broker agency, or even better, buyer agency, then I have no relationship to you and your office. I'm not responsible for the actions of the agents in that office.
Okay, so basically a good rule of thumb is if you ever co-list with somebody, then you want to make sure that
They're only broker agent,
they're only broker agent, right?
Right.
Okay, got it.
right? Because
And
it's not
then-
buyer agent. It's not a buyer agent situation. If I co-broke with you and both our companies are going to share that $8 million listing in Scarsdale, we're going
Right.
to split that together. Buyer's agent, that's separate. I'm talking about the relationship between you listing the property and me at the same time.
Got
We're
it.
both trying to get it sold. So
Okay.
anyone in your office that says, nope, sorry, not available. Some guy pulls up and, and is whatever. And you're just like, oh my God, we're not letting that guy come in this neighborhood. Then I'm responsible for that if we had a sub-agency or just a typical co-broke relationship. So I would
Because-
only offer you broker agent.
Because if you don't offer broker agent, then you can get sued by the buyer.
By something
right?
that someone in your office did, I could still get sued.
Right, okay.
If we're broker agent, then
Thank
you have
you.
no relationship to me other than the co-broke, but I'm not responsible for the actions of your agents.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Good? Okay, great. So there's actually a definition that's in red. See that in red? When I put yellow slides or red letters, what does that mean if I repeat it lots of times? It
In the
means you
top.
need to know it. So the definition of broker agent, trust me, you need to remember this. A broker agent is the cooperating broker who's an agent of the listing broker, but not a sub-agent of the seller. Just learn that sentence and you'll say, boy, Joe was great. Love that guy. A broker's agent is a cooperating broker who's the agent of the listing broker, but not strictly a sub-agent of the seller. Next topic. Dual agent. Let's talk about the dual agent now. An agent acting as a buyer's agent and a seller's agent in the same transaction in the same brokerage firm is a dual agent. Okay. When a broker represents both the buyer and the seller, we have, remember that thing we said is we had undivided loyalty. Remember loyalty, undivided loyalty? I can't be undivided loyalty to two people. I can only be loyal to one person, undivided. So when you're dual agent, the client, not you, the client loses undivided loyalty. I got to split my loyalty between two people. That's why a lot of times people go, you know what? No, I want my own agent. I don't want you to split loyalty. I want you to be loyal to me, not both of us. Right? In any other case, in most states, they go, how could it possibly be? Why would you hire one attorney to represent both parties? It's just ridiculous. Well, in the real estate world, it's pretty acceptable in New York, but in other states, they're like, it's impossible. How could you list and represent a seller and represent a buyer at the same time? Can't do it. So anyway, we need to get informed consent. Do we have any questions on this, by the way? Moving right along.
No,
Okay,
but all this
designated.
language is so It's so simple, but it's so confusing at the
Well,
same.
the best part is it'll be on the YouTube and you can watch it 900 times after today.
Yeah.
Okay. So when the buyer and the seller, and it's a dual agency situation, we call that an in-house transaction. Remember, the other one was called a cooperative transaction. In a cooperating transaction, there's the seller's represented by one party and the buyer by a separate party. In a dual agency situation, it's called an in-house transaction because everybody represents the broker and the broker represents both the buyer and the seller. Confusing? A little bit, right? A little bit confusing. Just keep in mind, every transaction, here's Joe. Joe's the broker of my office. Every single we'll go back into the MLS later if we have a little bit of time, and you look at all the transactions, they're all mine. Every single transaction in my office belongs to me. It's the coolest thing in the world. Sometimes it's not. When it comes to things going wrong, it's not cool because it's all my problems. But every single buyer that is working with all of my agents, they're my buyers. Every single listing that my office has listed, they're all my listings. So any buyer of my agents that goes to look at any one of my listings, you're a dual agent. Natasha, you've got a buyer. Roseanne, you've got a seller. You both work in my office. It's my seller and my buyer. So Natasha, you show Roseanne's property. You need to get permission to be a dual agent on that disclosure form. So what do you mean dual agent? It's not my listing. It's Roseanne's listing. But no, it's not. It's Joe's listing. That's not your buyer. It's Joe's buyer. So you're a dual agent, even though it's not your listing personally, and that's not your buyer. Roseanne, you're a dual agent because Natasha's buyer is my buyer. Not her buyer. It's my buyer. So you're still a dual agent. It's hard to understand this stuff. It's a little difficult. It's a little difficult. Keep going. So you can be a buyer's agent. That's a single agent. You can be a seller's agent. You can be a dual agent. There's only one thing you cannot be. A secret agent. Can't be secret agent. Everybody needs to know who is representing whom in the transaction. The last thing, the worst thing that could ever happen is for somebody to say, I don't have a clue who's representing me. Is it you? Is it, I don't know. Who's representing me? You don't know who's representing you? You better have something in writing. Everybody needs to know in the transaction who is representing whom. They don't have to be represented. If no one's representing you, fine, you're a customer, but you need to know.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
To be a dual agent, so I have to have the permission for the broker.
You need to get permission from the consumer, from the buyer or the seller.
Oh, okay.
I don't care.
Okay.
I'm representing everybody. If you're representing the buyer and the seller at the same time, they need to know.
Okay.
Not me.
Okay.
The consumer
They
needs to
both
know.
have to sign? For the dual agency, they both have to sign, the buyer.
Separate documents, but both need to sign. Right? Both need to sign.
The buyer and the seller need to
The
sign.
buyer and the seller each have a separate disclosure form. If you're the same agent for the buyer and the seller, you're going to have one form from the seller that gave you permission to be a dual agent and a separate form from the buyer that gave you permission to be a dual agent. Remember, every transaction is two transactions,
Yeah.
the buy side and the sell side. So you can't just have paperwork on one side unless you're only representing the seller and it's a cooperative transaction and the other client, the other person is represented by an agent from another office. I don't need to have two sets. My seller knows I'm only representing the seller. A buyer came along from another office. We have no relationship to them whatsoever. What are they if we're not related to them? The customer, right? They're the customer. So we don't need anything from them unless that customer comes to buy the house with no agent. Now the customer needs to know, I'm not representing you, customer. I'm representing the seller. Sign here, please. that you know that you are unrepresented.
Sorry to bring this up, but
No, I want you to bring up because can't possibly, there are questions. I know there's a lot of people out there. I can only see 3 people, but I know there's lots of questions. You need to ask them.
yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
can you repeat what a cooperative sale is again?
A cooperative transaction is
Mhm.
when the buyer's agent and the seller's agent are from 2 separate companies.
Okay.
All right. So if you're representing the seller in a cooperative transaction, the buyer is your customer. They've got their own agent. So there's no relationship with us. Just like you're being sued, you don't know the other attorney, they're representing that guy, you're being represented by your lawyer. 2 separate places, right?
That's the definition of the cooperative. sale.
Cooperative transaction, 2 separate offices are handling, one the buyer, one the seller, or one the landlord, one the tenant.
Okay.
Okay. If you go to a lawyer and you want to sue somebody and you say, hey, I'm getting sued by Bob Jones, he's suing me. That lawyer says, someone else in my office is representing Bob Jones. Sorry, we can't represent you here.
Mhm.
You can't do dual agency in a law firm. Can't
No.
do it. Anyone in that entire law firm cannot represent both parties. Doesn't happen. Go find a lawyer somewhere else.
Okay.
Can't do it. In the real estate world, they say they haven't changed the rules yet. I'm all for it. So in the real estate world, somebody comes in and says, I don't have an agent. Can you represent me and the seller? I'm cool with it. I just want to get the house. Great. New York State says you can do it. Moving right along. All right. Next. Agency forms. Now we're going to get to money. Okay. All of that other stuff we talked about was representation. Representation only, has nothing to do with money. Now we're going to talk about the money part. This is where it gets good. Okay. This is the good stuff. Not all bad and it's not all scary. By the way, I've never had a problem with all the agents. I've never had a problem in 23 years. Not a one. If people are trained properly, they go out, they get the stuff signed, everybody's happy. Is every single client happy in every single transaction? Hell no. There's always going to be, you get your Karens out there that are just got a problem with everybody, that they're just not happy and nothing's going to make them happy and they're just mad at the world. It happens. All the more reason to make sure that all your paperwork is signed because somebody's going to get pissed off about something. It's just human nature. Not everybody is easygoing. Some people look for the fly in the ointment is the old term, or the shell in the egg. When you crack the egg, some people look and they looking for the shell, right? So there's always going to be something. But if you get your paperwork done correctly, it's out of the way, done with, you're off the hook. Now I'm just showing you some houses. Let's go shopping. Now the fun stuff begins. So get it out of the way. It's important that you understand it has to be done. Get it done, get it out of the way. All right. So now let's talk money. Agency listing agreements. This is the contract to get paid. And there are different forms of listing agreements. We have this contract called an exclusive right to sell listing agreement. In an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, no matter what, the broker gets paid, no matter what. Okay, so here you are, Kane, you want to sell your house, right? So you call Natasha in, Natasha comes to your house, she signs a listing agreement with you, exclusive right to sell. She goes outside, she bangs a sign up in front of the front lawn, puts a sign out there, and she drives away. You decided, you know what? She's going to do an open house tomorrow. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to spruce up my yard. And you start cleaning up your yard, and your next door neighbor comes by and go, Kane, selling your house? No kidding. My daughter wants to live right next door to me. I want to buy your house. Great. Call Natasha and she'll show you around. right? Or you could say, yeah, come on in if you want to. Come on in. I'll show you the house. Great. Hey, Natasha, great news. My neighbor's daughter is going to buy the house. Natasha says, awesome. I'll call the lawyers and we'll put the deal together. Well, you're not going to charge me, are you? Yes. Exclusive right to sell. No matter what, the broker gets paid. I don't care who wants the house. I don't care if it's 8 seconds after I drove away, I'm getting paid. An exclusive right to sell, that means that the broker gets paid no matter what. Everybody follow that?
Yes.
That's a typical real estate listing agreement. It's called an exclusive right to sell. No matter what, you get paid. Now, let's just say you went to take the listing and somebody says, you know what? My brother may want to buy the house. Or I had a conversation. This is one of the listings that I just took the other day. The guy said, one of my neighbors down the street wants to buy the house. I said, great. He's got till Friday to make a decision if he wants it or not. Because on Saturday, it's going live and then you're done. Right? Or I could take the contract. I could put an exclusion in. The guy says, you know, my brother's trying to get financing. He may want the house. Okay, great. So we'll put an exclusion in. If your brother wants it, I'm not going to get paid, but I'm only going to give him a few days. I'm not going to give him like in 3 months from now. He's going to say, okay, I finally got the money. I want to buy the house. You either step up now or not. An exclusive right to sell. No matter what, the broker gets paid. Any questions on that?
So what happens if the person that wants to buy the property has a agent
Great.
for a different
And then
company?
I'm going to get paid and I'm going to give a split out to the buyer's agent.
With the agent or with the broker? With the other broker?
Everything's through brokers,
Brokers, okay.
right? Remember I passed the checks around the other day?
Mm-hmm.
Whose name was on all those checks?
Your.
Mine. They weren't my deals. Only that one deal that I showed you was my deal. The rest of them are agents in my office. All checks are mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The check comes to me. If it's a $10,000 check and you're on a 50-50 split, I'm going to give you $5,000.
Mm.
All checks are mine. So that's why you can't think about agents because everything is broker.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your
Okay.
listing, it's my listing. All right. So an exclusive right to sell, no matter what, the brokerage gets paid,
Okay.
no matter who buys the house. If another agent brings the buyer, I'm going to collect a commission from the seller and I'm going to go here. Thanks so much, Weichert. Here's your split for selling, bringing the buyer. Capiche? Everybody got that? Any other questions?
So this is like the listing agent always gets paid.
In an exclusive right to sell, the listing agent is always going to get paid, no matter what. Even if the seller decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to do some open houses myself. Great. Hey, Joe, one of the buyers walked in at my open house and he wants to buy the house. Great. I'm still getting paid.
Right.
I still get
Okay.
paid. Doesn't matter. Say, oh, Joe, I'm going to advertise it myself and I'm going to pay for some ads. You could do that if you want. I'm still getting paid. I get paid no matter what. An exclusive right to sell. Any other questions before I press the button to the next line? Next line, exclusive agency. In exclusive agency, the seller can sell it themselves, but if I bring a buyer, they're going to pay me. So I listed the house for sale. Same scenario. Kane listed his house with me to sell his house. With Natasha. Natasha drives away. The next door neighbor comes by and goes, Kane, you're selling your house. My daughter wants to buy the house. Great, come on in. Bring her in here. She looks at the house. She goes, thanks so much, Kane. I'll buy it. Terrific. Hello, Natasha. Thanks for all your help. I found the buyer myself. Have a nice day. Have a nice life. See you later. Get to sign off my front lawn. In exclusive agency, the seller can sell it themselves and not pay a commission. Everybody understand that? Joe, why would anybody want to sign that kind of an agreement? Anybody have that question? Somebody asked me that question.
Yes, why?
Why would somebody want to sign that agreement? Well, we have these things out there. It's called a FSBO, FSBO, means for sale by owner. And sometimes you can approach a for sale by owner and say, Mr. For sale by owner, Mr. Ms. whatever, they for sale by owner, have you ever considered having a professional sell your home? Well, no, I think I could sell it myself. I tell you what, Mr. For sale by owner, if I sell the house, you pay me, but if you sell the house yourself, you don't owe me anything. That's an exclusive agency form, right? Here's what happens. People do for sale by owners all the time. You've all seen a house that says for sale by owner, and it's sitting there for months and months and months. You see a regular sign with a realtor, it's gone in 3 weeks. A for sale by owner, month after month after month, it's still sitting there. And then all of a sudden, a brokerage firm gets the sign on there and it's gone in a week. For sale by owners have a very, very bad track record. Do you know why? Somebody say, why, Joe? Thank you, Natasha. Somebody say why. Thank you. Why? Have you ever gone to somebody's house? Let me ask you a question. Natasha, you ever go to somebody's house and it's kind of like messy and they go, oh, don't mind the mess?
Yes.
And what do you say?
Just laugh and say it's okay.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. You should see my house, right? Then you say something like that because you're being, what are you being? You're being polite. You're being nice. Of course, because you're a guest in somebody's house. When you're in a for sale by owner, you're a guest in their house. No one's going to walk into a for sale by owner and go, man, what a crap hole this is. This house is awful. It smells in here. You're never going to sell this. Nobody does that. So when you talk to a for sale by owner and you say, you need any help? I'm not going to need any help. Everybody comes in this house. They love the house. You should see how many people came in here. They all love the house. Did you sell it yet? Well, no, not yet, but somebody's going to buy it. No, not yet, because they don't like the house. They're not going to tell you they don't like the house because you're a guest in their house. They're not going to tell you that. Plus, the public knows New York is a caveat emptor state. Remember yesterday? Legal terms, Latin. Real estate terms, Old English. Caveat emptor. Anybody know what that means? Caveat emptor means let the buyer beware. New York is a caveat emptor state. Let the buyer beware, which means the seller can lie to you, tell you the house is great, not a single thing wrong with it. Oh yeah, I've lived here for 9 years, and meanwhile he only owns it a month. He could lie to you up and down, and you're buying it. You're on your own, and the public knows that. So public doesn't trust for sale by owner. So this exclusive agency is designed for sale by owner to take the listing, and I'll give you a shot. You sell it, you don't owe me anything. If I sell it, you're going to pay me a commission. So I list the property. Pedro from another company brings the buyer. The seller's going to pay me, and I'm going to pay the buyer's agent. Got it?
You said when you offer your help to the sell by owner, the seller paid the commission to you. It's not in this case the buyer paid the commission to you. It's the
Buyer
seller.
almost never pays a commission.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Wait, so for sell by the owner, it's an exclusive agency. You don't necessarily have to be a broker or a sales agent?
You always have to be a broker because only a broker can enter into a contract.
Oh,
with
I thought
the
for
consumer.
sell by owner was a
Sale by owner is an owner of a house.
not for sell by owner. Like I thought it was a different type of agency. Like
No, for sale by owner is you decided you don't want to hire a realtor and you're going to sell it yourself.
okay,
That's a for sale by owner. So
That's
now
for the-
I'm going to go to that for sale by owner and say, hey, for sale by owner, I see your house is sitting on the market for 3 months. Every listing I took is sold in 1 week. Why is your house still sitting here? Can I see it? Yes. I go in the house, take a look and go, oh, okay. I could get this house sold for you. Yeah, but I don't want to pay a commission. I tell you what, you keep trying to sell it yourself. If I bring a buyer, you pay me. And if I don't bring a buyer, you don't pay me. How's that?
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no. And after a while, they always say yes. Very
And that-
rare. It's like 5% of for sale by owners ever get sold without an agent.
And that's the exclusive agency, correct?
That's called exclusive agency. You can bring your own buyer and you don't owe me a commission. Exclusive right to sell, no matter what, I'm getting paid.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So if the for you were saying something about an example how like the for sale by owner says like I've lived here for 9 years, but he's probably been there for like 1 year. Isn't that like so like that's an example of just saying like he just like he can lie like that and an agent can't? Or
An agent cannot.
but the for sale by owner can?
For sale by owner is just I mean, if you're selling your car, Kane, you know the transmission is gonna break in any minute. Somebody came to your house, here's $5,000, and they drove away, and the transmission falls out down the street. And they come back and they go, hey, this transmission just fell out. And you go, wow, that sucks. Have a nice day.
That's what the for sale by owner can do?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
if you bought your car from a dealer, I like to refer to cars because everybody owns cars and they can relate. If you bought your car from a dealer and you drove away and the transmission fell out, what happens? You come back to the dealer and go, tranny fell out. So, oh, okay, we got to fix it now because we sold you a car and we are a licensed dealer. So we got to give it at least 3 months or 3,000 miles. We got to put a warranty on, right?
Got you.
Same thing. Realtor has to tell the truth. Realtor has to disclose stuff that's wrong with the house. They have to tell you everything about it. If that roof is 20 years old, I need to tell you it's a 20-year-old roof. As long as I know. Everybody follow me? Exclusive right to sell. No matter what, the broker gets paid. Exclusive agency. The seller can sell it himself and not pay a commission. An open listing. An open listing, you give the listing out to all different agents. Whoever brings me a buyer, that's who I'm going to pay. In the MLS world, in the multiple listing service for homes, you can't have an open listing. It's not allowed. Only one broker can list a house at a time for residential real estate. If you're selling an office building, it's a different story. You're selling an office building, I can say, Pedro, you and your company, here's how much I want, $2 million for my building. You bring me a buyer, I'll pay you. Roseanne, your company, you bring me a buyer, I'll pay you. Kane, your company, you bring me a buyer, I'll pay you. I can list it with 25 different brokerage firms. First one to bring me a buyer gets paid. That's an open listing. We're not allowed to do open listings in the residential world, but in the commercial world or rentals, we're allowed, you can do that. Open listing. First one to bring me a client gets paid. Yes, Pauline.
Is that on the test? Because
You what?
is that on the test? Is that like something that we need to know, like if it's a commercial?
No. No. You just need to know what an open listing is.
Oh, okay.
An open listing, first one to bring the buyer gets paid.
First one.
But you can list with multiple brokerage firms. An exclusive right to sell means I'm the only broker, and if I sell it, I'm getting paid no matter what. Exclusive agency, I'm the only one you're signing a contract with. That's the exclusive part. Open listing, it's not exclusive. I'm giving it to every brokerage firm. Bring me a buyer, and I'll pay you.
But that's possible.
Not in residential real estate, not possible.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
You said just commercial and what else?
Commercial and rentals.
Just
Don't need to know that for the test. That's just real life stuff.
Uh-huh.
Net listings. New York says net listings are illegal. Net listings are legal in other states. New Jersey net listings are legal. So somebody says, look, I want 500,000 for my house. I don't care what you charge over 5, you keep that part. I get 500. So go ahead, Natasha, you sell it for 575, you keep the 75, I'm getting 5. New York says that's illegal. Other states, Jersey, you could do that. You can sell it for 6. Seller wanted 5, here's your 5, I made 100 grand.
Mhm.
New York says can't do that. Net listings are illegal in New York. And there you go. Next. Just so you understand, a listing agreement is a contract between a seller and the broker. Multiple listing, the MLS, multiple listing service, just so you understand the difference, it's not a type of listing. Multiple listing service is an advertising firm. That's all it is. It is a collaboration. And just like I described to you on day one, They used to be, before the internet, it was this advertising company that says, hey, we're going to publish a book with all the listings in the whole Westchester County. So you guys give me all your listings, you give me all yours. We're going to put it in a book and we're going to split commissions and everybody's going to share each other's listings. That's all the multiple listing service is. It's not a type of listing agreement. It is just a form of collaboration between the different brokerage firms. Just, I don't want you to be confused that what kind of listing is that? It's not a listing. A listing is a contract between a seller and a broker. Okay, great. Are we due for a break? It's 8:30. What do you think? Break time?
Yes, but before you leave, you said listing agreement is a contract between a seller and buyer?
No, a
broker?
seller and their broker.
Okay.
Listing agreement is a contract to get paid from the seller and the agent, the brokerage firm that he hires. Okay. An exclusive right to sell, no matter what, that brokerage gets paid. Exclusive agency, the seller can sell it himself, but if the brokerage brings the buyer, they're going to pay them. But if the seller does an open house and somebody walks in on a Sunday and says, I'll take it. Thanks, Natasha, for all your help. I sold it myself. Have a nice day.
Mm-hmm.
Come get your sign off my lawn or I'm going to throw it in the garbage. Okay, great. All right, let's take 8:30. So we'll see you guys at 8:40.
Okay.
Sounds good. Any questions? You guys all got this? Feeding information into your head. Dominic gave me a thumbs up. Thank you.
I have a question
Yes, sir.
about the MLS. You said it was an ad company that collabs what? They collab like audiences?
It's a collaboration of brokerage firms. We're just sharing information. That's all it is.
Oh, okay, okay.
All right. You just cut 1 minute out of our break time. So
I apologize.
8:41. We'll be back.
Okay,
All right.
all right. Thanks.
Bye.
Okie doke.
Don't let anybody come up to you, "Ah," you know. Huh? But you know what I mean? They'll be drunk what time is it they start? They'll be drinking at 4, they'll get there, you know, 7, they'll only be fine, whatever, 6, they'll only be fine. like catch one very nice color. But the girl wear different versions, like one shoulder or five shoulders, stuff like that. So it's not so matchy match. That's what everybody's same colors. This is a color. That's why you why? I didn't read it. I won't read it. I just didn't see that I read it. Is that the iPhone shows that you read it? I just saw that I got a notification about it said we had to postpone Memorial. I didn't read the whole thing, but I said that when I read it, she didn't see that I read it. I just said, well, why do you postpone Memorial? Yeah, girl, can't be here. Yeah, which means you know that they're not going to all that's out. Who's that? Who's that? Billy McKinney. No idea. Yeah. Gotcha.
We're back. Are we having fun tonight?
Loads of fun.
Loads of
Yes.
fun. Thank you.
Stop.
I'm having a great time.
What? What is that?
Okay. I guess we kept recording through those 10 minutes. Fast forward when you're watching it. All right, back to. We created, just like we created a agency, we can terminate agency. A listing is a contract. A listing agreement is a contract. So any contract can be terminated. So how can we terminate a listing or this contract between the seller and the listing broker? First of all, if the property gets sold, you hired me to sell your house. I sold it. I performed what I was supposed to do. Listing is over. In selling a house, we get a time limit. You don't take a listing forever. You take a listing and say, okay, I'm going to list the house today. You're going to give me 6 months to sell your house or 1 year to sell your house. That time came and went. I didn't sell the house. It expires. Listing is over. Okay. Expiration of time. Abandonment by broker. We're supposed to be marketing. You're hiring somebody to sell your house. They're supposed to be working. Doesn't mean you have to be there every day, but you're supposed to do work. You're also supposed to communicate with your client. Today, there's no excuse. Everybody we already discussed has one of these things, right? Everybody has one. There's no excuse
Mhm.
for somebody to say, hey, broker Joe, yeah, my agent that works for you, Natasha, haven't spoken to her in 3 months. Haven't had a single appointment. No one came. I didn't see any ads anywhere. I'm canceling my listing because she abandoned my property. No excuse. You need to stay in communication with your client. Call them up every week, every 2 weeks, and just say, hey, Bob, I don't have anything to tell you. I'm just calling to tell you I have nothing to tell you. You have to communicate with your client or you're abandoning it, and they can cancel the listing. It could be revoked by the owner. An owner can say, I don't want you to sell my house anymore. But there are costs involved when a seller says, I don't want you to list my house anymore, take it off the market. Okay, I'll take it off the market, but we did 3 open houses. I spent $1,000 on a photographer and printing, so you owe me $3,000 and I'll cancel the listing. You can do that. Can't just cancel for no reason. And I can tell you from experience, when somebody wants to cancel a listing in the middle of the listing, most of the time somebody knocked on the door and said, hey, get rid of the broker so we don't have to pay fees and I'll buy your house. Lots of times that happens. So cancellation, revocation by owner, the owner wants to cancel the transaction. They can, but they're going to owe you fees. When you're working with a buyer, if you have a contract with your buyer and they cancel, there's no expenses, so they can just cancel anytime. Anybody can cancel an agreement, but if you cancel, there might be some penalties, some money. A broker can cancel a transaction. I can decide that I don't want to list your house anymore. I'm only allowed to show it on Saturday between 1 and 2 p.m. I got to walk your dogs. It's dangerous. It's disgusting house. You're not cooperating with me. I don't want this listing anymore. I'm canceling it. A broker can cancel the listing. Or even better, Joe, you took a listing and it's a $500,000 house and you listed it for $900,000. And I come in and you show it to me and I say, you know what? I don't want that. That's embarrassing. I don't want that listing in my office. Cancel the listing. It's my listing, not yours. I can cancel that listing anytime I want. Mutual assent. That means both parties, the owner and the broker, decided we don't want to work together. You don't want to work with me? Great. I don't want to work with you either. Cancel the contract. Anytime, any contract, we discussed that yesterday, any agreement between 2 parties, if both parties agree to cancel, we can cancel any agreement. It's called mutual assent. Bankruptcy, death, or insanity of either the broker, not the agent, and the seller, the client, terminates a listing. Or total destruction of the property. Airplane engine falls out of the sky, house is just leveled. There's no house to sell. Total destruction of the property terminates the listing as well. Okay, great. No questions. Next, we have another type of disclosure. First, we had our agency disclosure, right? Next, we have a property condition disclosure form. In a property condition disclosure form, I mentioned before that New York State is a caveat emptor state. Let the buyer beware. So if we're a let the buyer beware state, New York put in place many years ago, we had a governor named Pataki, and Governor Pataki said, hey, you know what? We need some protection for buyers. If they buy a home, whether you're selling it on your own or not, a seller has to fill out this thing called a property condition disclosure statement. It has 48 questions in it. And those questions are, how long have you owned the property? How is there any problem with the property? Does the roof leak? Did the windows leak? Does the basement flood? It's a whole bunch of questions. And you can answer yes, no, unknown, or not applicable. If you don't have a basement, NA. Right? So you're to fill out this form. You're required by New York State law to fill out this form. But not everybody fills out the form. Again, I mentioned this earlier. Is it possible that your roof never leaked for 30 years, is it possible that tonight it starts raining and the roof leaks? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Your basement,
Yes.
I've lived here for 40 years. My basement never leaked once, dry as a bone. Is it possible we could have some kind of a storm and your basement starts leaking?
Yes.
Totally, right? So now if you filled out that form and it asks you flat out, does your roof leak? And you said no, you lied on that form. Somebody can actually sue you and take you to court and say you lied on the form. You said under perjury, you signed this, said that it was truthful, and it says the basement doesn't flood. So normally attorneys tell their client, don't fill out the form. I don't want you to fill it out. So what happens if you don't fill it out? I'm required by law to fill it out. Well, you have to pay a penalty of $500 if you don't fill it out. But you don't pay the penalty to the state. The buyer gets the $500 at closing. It's a credit to the buyer at closing. Most attorneys tell you not to fill it in. I don't know any attorney that says, yeah, go ahead and fill the form out. Not one. But you're not a lawyer. Are you a lawyer? Anybody here a lawyer?
It's better not to
We're
sign
not
that.
lawyers. So we cannot give legal advice. So when you go to take that listing, we signed a listing agreement. We signed agency. Now I got the next document is a property condition disclosure statement to say, buyer, Mr. Seller, you are either going to fill this form out or at closing, give a $500 credit to the buyer for not filling it out. Which one should I do, Irene? Well, I'm not a lawyer. I can't legally tell you that. Okay, so what do? Ask your lawyer, show him the form when you get an accepted offer, and ask your lawyer if he wants you to fill it out. Yeah, but I don't have anything to hide. Give me the paper. I'll fill it out. No, you can't fill it out.
No.
Ask your lawyer whether you should fill it out or not. It's up to him to direct you whether you should or you should not. Okay? I don't care. Give me the paper. Start filling it in. Ask me the questions. I'm not legally allowed to do anything. I can't even write your name on it. My job is to give you this form and inform you that you're either going to fill it out or not fill it out and give the buyer a closing credit of $500. Everybody understand that?
That amount doesn't change. It's over $500.
$500. That's it. $500.
So it's the seller's decision to sign it or not to sign it?
Based on their legal advice from their attorney.
Got it. You're just presenting it to them.
My job is to give it to them and let them know that you're either going to fill it out or give a $500 credit to the buyer at closing. In 23 years, 2 times was it ever filled out. We had thousands of transactions. Only
Really?
twice was it ever filled out. And they were both
So-
the same situation.
So what about gathering all the information if you want to know if there's bats, if there's rodents, if there's this and that? How do you find that information?
That's my own personal, when I took the listing. This
Okay,
is
so-
something that's going to be given to the buyer.
Oh, this is given to the buyer.
This is going to be given to the buyer when it's filled out.
So the other paper where you're gathering
That's
information.
between me and the seller. That's just for
between
my
you and the seller.
information. It's not a
Okay.
document. That's just a list of things questions that I'm asking them.
Oh, I thought this was the same thing.
No, this is strictly from New York State
Got it.
for the seller to fill out.
Got it.
All right?
Professor,
Yes.
what if they lie on the disclosure and after you buy the home and you find out that, hey, I looked back on the disclosure and it said, I don't know, that the floor wasn't falling. And then when I started living in the house, the floor started sinking. I mean, that's just an example. So is there
And
any
you
penalty
would
for
have
that?
a really good lawsuit
Oh, okay.
because
So
he lied
the,
on a document that stated that there was nothing wrong with the house.
so the seller is binded by law basically to tell the truth on the disclosure.
Right, which is why lawyers say don't fill it out.
I see.
Because then if it does leak or the floor does sink or the basement does flood, then you lied on that document and they can sue you. So lawyers usually tell the seller, don't fill it out. Again, I only filled it out twice, only had them fill it out twice in 23 years. What was the situation? Same situation. Family members didn't live there for 30 years. They lived in different parts of the country. Grandma died or old man died, and they came in to sell the house. They were now the sellers, and they said unknown, 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 unknown. 2 times in 23 years. Did they ever fill it out? It was the same thing. I didn't live there in 30 years. Do I know if the basement floods? I don't know. Check it off. I don't know if the roof leaks. I don't know. Check it off. Unknown, unknown, unknown. The only 2 times. I've never, ever, other than that, ever had a seller fill out the form. Ever. They don't fill it out. Most attorneys, almost every attorney will say,
Just put unknown all the way down.
I'm sorry? Say it
Could you
again?
Of unknown. Could you just check off unknown
No, because somebody
if
could
you wanted to.
question you that you did know. You didn't live in the house in 30 years. You have no idea if it floods or not. You're
Right.
living in the house,
Okay.
you should know the condition of your house and you could get sued. That's only 2 times it was ever done. And that's not on my discretion. The attorney said, go ahead and fill it out. You moved to California, you live in Virginia, you live in Florida. Nobody's suing you for a roof in Florida, Virginia, or South Dakota, or wherever the heck they live. That's the only time. So it never gets filled out. So we have a disclosure for the disclosure. Okay, so this disclosure statement is required for any home 1 to 4 family. There are 48 questions on there. If you don't get the form, you get a $500 credit at closing from the seller. So it's $500 goes towards your closing costs. The seller gives you $500. All right. If there's undisclosed defects that they like a buried oil tank or something that's very costly that could have been avoided, like if your basement floods, you've got homeowners insurance. Your roof leaks, you've got homeowners insurance. You're not going to go back for somebody. But if there's a buried oil tank that you lied about, they can still come after you for certain items on there. All right. So we have a disclosure form for the disclosure, because you might get to a closing and as they're going through the items and they're saying, okay, seller, here's how much you're paying for this, and here's this, and here's that, and here's that $500 credit. And they go, 500, what 500? Well, your broker explained to you when he took the listing that remember that form you didn't fill out? You didn't tell me about any $500. Nobody told me about that. Well, there's a disclosure for the disclosure that says that you're going to get it signed by the buyer or the seller, whoever you represent, that says that you're either going to get this form filled out from the seller or get a credit at closing. The buyer can sign it, that they understand that if we don't get this form, we're getting $500. The seller is going to fill it out and understand you're either going to fill this form out or give $500 at closing. Got it? Great.
So buyer and seller fill it out.
They're just signing it that they understand it. So if you have a buyer and you have an accepted offer, you're going to have your buyer fill this out with all the other forms they're going to sign. And if you're taking a listing, the seller's going to sign this, that they understood what you told them, that if they don't fill it out, they're going to give $500. Whether you do or you don't, that's between you and your lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you which one to do. I'm not going to explain to them, hey, you know what? What if your roof leaked tomorrow? You'd be lying. It's not my job to do that. I'm not a lawyer. I cannot practice law. So all I could say is ask your lawyer for advice, what to do. Okay. 2 debts already, agency and the property condition disclosure. We have another form that only came out in June of 2020, right in the middle of the C word pandemic. We have a new disclosure. It's called a fair housing disclosure form. Fair housing disclosure form actually informs people of what the different protected classes are, so that most people, according to New York State, have no idea if they're in a protected class. So they actually list all the protected classes that affect fair housing: race, creed, color, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, military status, age, sex, disability, marital status, lawful source of income, or familial status. If you are in any one of those categories, you're in a protected class. And if someone discriminates, you need to know, what do I do? You can call New York State Department of State Division of Human Rights and file a complaint against your realtor for discriminating, or against a seller or anyone else for discriminating. New York State has that. So that is another form, and it's a fair housing anti-discrimination disclosure form. Came out May of 2020, it became law June 1st, 2020. That's not long ago. All right. On the form, tells all the different types of discrimination, where you can file a complaint. Your client, whoever you're working for, is going to fill in. This was provided to me by your agent. I put my broker there, sorry. Your agent name. The client, whoever that is going to put their name here, print it. They're going to sign it, and usually you're going to circle. Is it the buyer or the tenant? You circle consumer. If it's the seller signed it, you circle seller. If it's the landlord, you circle landlord. Put a date on it. That's our disclosure number 3. 3 already to take a listing. If you're working with a buyer, as soon as you meet a buyer, I'm representing you in this transaction. I'm representing you as a buyer's agent. Sign here, please, agency and anti-discrimination. That's 2 required for a buyer. That's already 3 now for a seller that we have to provide. All this stuff got to get signed. Smoke and carbon monoxide detector affidavit has to be signed. All people have to sign this, right? Any residential unit, even if it's an apartment building, if we're renting out space, everybody signs a smoke alarm carbon monoxide affidavit that says that there are working smokes in the property. All right. Those have to get notarized. You don't have to get that, but when you're taking a listing, usually the attorneys will attach this on there. It's good to give it to the seller, knowing that he's going to have to sign that when he gets to some point in the transaction. He's going to need to get it signed. Next one. We all following? Lead-based paint disclosure. Another disclosure. Lead-based paint. Paint used to have a metal in it called lead. You know lead? Lead was mixed into paint in order for paint to actually cover. So you can, if you paint on the walls, it covered. It had great coverage. If you were someone my age, we used to paint with oil-based paint when I was young, and all that paint had lead in it. And the lead was a heavy metal that helped the paint cover. When you painted back then, 1 coat of paint, I don't care what you paint on, crayons and lipstick, it covered. Everything was covered with 1 coat of paint because that had lead in the paint. They found somewhere in the early 70s or mid 70s, they figured out that lead was very harmful. So they decided to take lead out of paint. But they could not legislate that every single house built before 1978 that had a coat of paint on it. We can't require that every single house built before 1978, you got to take all the lead out, all the paint everywhere, and get it out of the house. So what do? We have a lead-based paint disclosure form. Basically, it is notifying both parties, the seller and the buyer, that there is lead present in any house built before 1978. So they're going to sign another disclosure form. This disclosure form, found here on the right, is a lead warning statement. This form is informing the seller that he has an obligation, if he knows about lead in the paint, that he has lead paint present, he must inform the buyer. The buyer has to be informed that there could be lead-based paint in their house. Anybody live in a house older than 1978? No idea how old your house is? If your house is built before 1978, you do have lead in the paint. That was the only paint that was available. After 1978, if your house was built in 1979 or later, we don't need this form, but it's required on any home built before 1978. So when you take a listing or you're dealing with a buyer and they're putting an offer in on a house built before 1978, we have to fill out a lead disclosure form, and all parties receive this booklet called Protect Your Family from Lead.
They include the apartments as well?
The rentals as well. Yes, any unit built before 1978, whether you're renting it or buying it, the buyer or the tenant have to be aware that there is lead in the paint. Okay, so there's 2 parts to this form. The seller either knows about it or the seller has no knowledge. The seller initialed it, has no knowledge of lead-based paint. If the seller does have knowledge, usually they have had some sort of test or some sort of report, and they know I got lead paint all over the place in here. Here's all the paperwork from the contractor that was here. Or I had so much extensive work done, they took all the lead paint out. Here's the certificate from the Environmental Protection Agency that all the lead was removed. Great. So all those records have to be given to the buyer. The seller has no records and no knowledge is pretty typical because most people have no clue about this. So that's the seller side. And if you're the listing agent, you're supposed to inform the seller that if you have any information on lead, we must give it to the buyer. So the agent initials, the seller initials, whether they do know or they don't know. Seller signs it, agent signs it. If you're representing the buyer, this is part two. The buyer has to say we either received copies, so the seller has reports and has information on it. Here it is, buyer, all the information we have on the lead. So the buyer would initial that they received copies. If they did not, then they did not. But they got a copy of this pamphlet. Everyone has to initial that they received it. And there's a 10-day opportunity in any agreement that we're going to hire somebody to test to see if there's lead in the paint. You're allowed to do that. Anyone buying a home or renting before 1978, it's legal for you. They have to give you 10 days to change your mind if they find lead in the paint. However, they didn't have anything else before 1978. So if you have a house that was built in 1960, you're testing, you're going to get a positive answer. You're not going to test a house built in 1960 and go, nope, no lead in the house. It's impossible. It's all they had. So you can go ahead and test it, or you can waive the inspection, which is about $2,000 just to find out that it's there. We already know it's there. Let's just assume it's there and be cautious about the lead in the walls. When we do the environmental class, we'll talk more about it. You just need to know about this disclosure. So now the initials that they received this book. Back when we started, I have an actual original here of the book. It's somewhere in my briefcase, wherever I put my briefcase. I usually hand it out and everybody looks at the book. It's a pamphlet, or you can send a PDF. If I give you the booklet, the pamphlet, actual printed one, then you're going to fill out the form that you received it. If I gave it to you in an email and I attached a PDF of that booklet, you need to reply to me that you received the lead book. I want to make sure that I cover my tail that you received it. I don't want to ever happen that somebody did not get the book and they're going to sue me because their kid is sick or something like that. It causes all kind of health issues.
You said they have up to 10 days to see if they
To
want to
test.
proceed. Okay.
Correct. But in most cases, I would talk my client out of testing. Why would you talk them out of testing it, Joe? Because you're going to get a positive answer. You have a house built in 1935, 1940, 1950, 1975. That's all they had to add to the paint. There was no other kind of paint. All paint was oil-based paint, no such thing as latex. Back in the 60s, everything was oil paint and it all had lead. So what's the point of testing it? You want to throw 2,000 away? Great, go ahead and do it. I'm just recommending that you just treat it like there's lead there and be careful. Read the booklet, tells you how to do repairs. And when you're sanding, got to wear masks, got to wash your hands because it's very, we'll talk about it in the environmental class. Everybody got that? It's another disclosure. Patricia, do you have a question? You just popped up on my screen.
Yeah, just I'd like to know, what about if you decide to buy a house and the house is being already painted? No matter if it's being like
if it's been painted over,
yes.
Well, the lead's still underneath it.
Oh, okay.
So it's fine if you paint it over it. It's totally fine. But what if the paint starts to chip?
Oh, okay.
And then a little baby takes a piece of that paint and they put everything in their mouth anyway. And now they just ate lead. Lead has been traced, if you read the booklet, and we'll do it in environmental, to learning defects in children, growth defects in children, heart disease in men, all kind of tumors in women, pregnancy issues in women. Lead is very toxic. So your paint, all the walls are beautiful and painted. So what's the big deal? Well, you decided to hire somebody to put hi-hats in, the recessed lighting, and they take a keyhole saw and they start cutting holes in the ceiling, and all that dust has got lead in it.
So by law, we have to provide this information no matter
This
what.
information, no matter what, right? If it's built before 1978, if the house is built in 79, not required,
Okay.
okay? Great. So here's the form. Again, here's for the buyer side and for the seller side. It's filled out differently. You guys have these slides so you can see what's going on there. Okay, a couple of other disclosures. We're allowed to sell anywhere in the state of New York. So if you happen to sell a house way upstate where they have natural gas underground, natural gas, by the way, biggest scam on the planet. They make us think that there's no natural gas. Every single state in the entire United States has got natural gas under it. Every state. We have so much natural gas, they actually let it out into the environment instead of giving it to us for free or very cheap, because they like to keep the price of oil up. We could convert every car, every single boiler, every single anything that works on oil-based products can run on natural gas. They don't want us to know that. Natural gas is under every single state in the United States. So upstate New York, where they've got large pieces of property, the same way in Texas, they've got those things that pump oil out of the ground. Well, in New York, they have these wells that pump natural gas out of the ground. And the oil company comes in and says, we would like to lease property from you to take the natural gas out from underground. And so they lease the property. 10 years come by, they took all their equipment away, and they leave this well of natural gas. Flammable, dangerous, people can fall into the well. There's natural gas coming out of it, so it's a fire hazard as well. If there are natural gas wells on the property, it's a seller's responsibility to cap the wells and notify anybody. Okay. Next. A couple of other disclosures. If you're selling property in New York City or some apartment buildings, any units that have children younger than 11, legally, the landlord, upon request, should be putting window guards in all the windows in case somebody falls out. There was a musician. Anybody ever hear of a guy named Eric Clapton? The musician Eric Clapton?
Yeah.
The band The Who. Eric Clapton lived in Manhattan, and his babysitter was watching his baby, and the baby was leaning out 10 stories in the air on the screen, looking out the window, and the screen broke and the baby fell to his death. So any property that has children in it, they put steel bars outside the windows so you can't fall out the windows. Okay, you're allowed to request that. So if you're selling units, again, we're licensed in the whole state of New York. If you're selling an apartment or renting and there's children there, we can require the landlord to put them in there. Most landlords of any buildings that I know of, they put them in all the windows. They don't know who might show up as a guest and lean out a window, so they put them on every window. Bed bugs.
That's only if required, right? What if they don't
It's
want?
only if requested.
Okay,
Right,
if
but
requested.
landlords can still get sued, so they're not getting,
Mm.
if they don't request it, but landlords usually put them on all the windows now. They just put them on one by one because it's a liability for everybody. Another new thing, bed bugs, for rentals especially, bed bug disclosure law. Once bed bugs are discovered in a unit, whether it's a house or an apartment, that property is stigmatized forever. So that once bed bugs are there, you must disclose to anyone afterwards that bed bugs were present in this unit. Forever. Forever. Bed bugs are different. Like you can have an apartment full of roaches. If you leave and leave the apartment vacant, those roaches will die. If they have nothing to eat, they'll go somewhere else or they'll just die. Bed bugs can live 6 months to a year with no food. They're living in an apartment that's vacant, and then all of a sudden you move in and they say, I smell flesh. And they just come by and they just start all over again. So when bed bugs are treated, if they were treated and they were infested, they must notify every tenant afterwards that there were bed bugs. They're not here now, but they were present. You need to notify people that there were bed bugs present. If you go to a hotel, you can request to see if any rooms were treated for bed bugs. They have to tell you.
So that's a question you have to ask your potential seller or
Most
or
tenants,
landlord.
yeah, for tenants, there's a bed bug form when you're dealing with tenants. If there are bed bugs, landlords are required. If you're a tenant, if you're an agent listing a property, you got to ask the landlord, was this place ever treated for bed bugs?
Okay.
Right? You do want to do that.
Before
A
we
lot of
move-
people don't bother, but if they were found and they sued, because it costs a lot of money. If you have bed bugs, it costs a fortune just to treat one room.
Wow.
Can you hear?
Okay, any other environmental hazards? We'll talk about rental income producing property. If somebody asks you, if you're showing property and that, you know, like an apartment building, we are required to disclose the amount of rent we collect. We can first ask questions like, you know, who are you? You want to know how much rent I collect? Who are you? We can ask for information about the buyer of the property or the potential buyer, but we are required to give that information. And also the truth in heating law. Truth in heating law is relatively new also. You didn't have to disclose what your utility bills were. I was just talking to my group today, and we were talking about this in my office meeting today, that people don't ask how much the utility bills are. You imagine buying a house and not knowing? I live in Rockland County, so we don't have Con Edison, we have Orange and Rockland. My utility bill.
Wow.
Holy cow. Imagine buying my house and not knowing that it's going to cost you $839 for 1 month for utility bills. How you like them apples?
Wow.
So truth in heating law, upon request,
Electric house?
what's that?
Is it all electric?
I have 3 girls living in my house with me. We take lots of showers in here. We wash a
No,
lot
but
of
it's just-
towels. We
Okay.
use a lot of heat and we use a lot of air conditioning. Don't get me started. Anyway, truth in heating law, upon request, we want to know what the utilities bills are. They have to give you 2 years of utility bills upon request. They don't volunteer them, but as a buyer's agent, I like to ask all the time, can I see the utility bills? If my buyer is going to make a decision whether they like this place or not, and they're dealing with how much it's going to cost, how much is closing costs, the new interest rates and how much it costs, I want to know, am I going to get stuck with an $800 utility bill every month? I need to know that. And I want my buyers to know that as well. That's just good business to know that.
Do people do this? Is this a common practice that agents ask the sellers?
No, it's not common practice because agents don't want to do anything to blow a sale.
Gotcha.
But I think it's irresponsible if you're representing your buyer and their best interest. Don't you think that that should be part of your job? That's
Yeah.
my feeling anyway, to find out how much it costs every month to run this house.
100%.
I think it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Not everybody, not some agents would say, oh my God, it costs $800. Throw that in the garbage. Don't tell anybody. The buyer might change their mind and then I got to start all over again, finding them a house.
So Joe,
Yes.
the buyer's agent, is the buyer's agent obligated to let buyer know that, you know, the buyer has the right to demand for that information?
Yes. So
Oh.
you're not required to do it, but
Uh-huh.
it's part of your fiduciary obligation to work in your client's best interest.
Okay, thank
Right?
you.
I mean, if you've got somebody, Mrs. Barada, Blondie over there, has a client that has a net worth of about $300 million. I don't think that guy's going to sweat his utility bill. So I don't think it's necessary to say, hey, you know, it costs $900 a month. The guy probably, his toilet paper costs $900 a month. I don't think he's concerned about that. But there are buyers that are right on the fence and every dime is counted and they don't want to come up $5,000 in the asking price because that's going to increase their mortgage payment by $50 a month. And they go, oh, I don't know if I could swing that. Don't you want to know how much it costs to heat the place?
Mm-hmm.
If it was your kid, I always like to put this, I'm not just a broker. I like to talk to people like do unto others, you know, the guy upstairs, he made the golden rule. if this was your kid, not your client, if you were shopping with your child to buy them a house, would you not want them to know how much it costs to heat the place? Wouldn't you want to know as a parent shopping for your child to find a house? Wouldn't you want to know?
Of course.
Yeah. You know, people buy cars all the time. I love to relate to cars. People buy cars all the time. There's people buying like Mercedes and like BMWs and stuff like that, and they have no idea that a tire change, like you go to BMW for anything, it's like $2,200. You go for an oil change, it's like $350. If you don't have that kind of money, then you don't belong buying that kind of car. And you need to know that, right? A brake job, you go for a brake job on a BMW, it's like $2,200. Not like a brake job on a Chevy that you go in there, it's like, oh, this one's $400. It's a lot of money. If you're not prepared to do that, you need to know that. You don't just say, oh, I can afford $600 a month, I'll take that BMW. You need to know how much it costs. Don't you think so? Don't you need to know that it's, you know, I have a truck that it gets 14 miles to the gallon. You need to know that. It's a 31-gallon tank. You need to know how much it costs to fill this thing. Otherwise, you shouldn't be buying it. You follow me?
Yes.
So I think personally, do I speak for all agents? I don't really care what other people do. I'm only responsible for me, and my agents are me. So I like to know what utility bills are going to be. I think it's irresponsible to be representing your buyer in their best interest and not even ask how much it costs to heat the place. Right? Great.
Yeah.
That's just,
So
again, that's just me.
So, Joe, when you represent, when
Hold
you're
on.
representing.
Ellie first, Joe.
Oh, I'm
Hang
sorry,
on.
my apologies.
Ellie, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I just remembered one time there's a radon issue. Is radon a mandatory disclosure?
Not mandatory. We'll do that on chapter 18, but
Okay.
radon, another
All right, thank
disclosure.
you.
There's no disclosure for radon.
Okay, thanks.
So now we had that listing agreement. I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
So if you're representing the seller, you're not asking, you're not even bringing it up, what the utility bills, or you're gonna bring it up as curiosity?
I'm going to tell the seller when I take a listing that if a buyer asks for it, we are required to give them 2 years of utility bills.
Okay,
Water, electric, and whatever, you know, whatever utility you have,
got it,
whether it's gas or oil. Need to see
Okay.
the bills.
got
Right?
it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pretty important. All right. Thanks. Good questions, by the way, everybody. So now we had a listing agreement to take a listing and represent the seller. You can also represent, the buyer with an exclusive right to represent. It's the same thing like an exclusive right to sell. Exclusive right to represent means that buyer is going to work with you exclusively. It's not agency. Agency is not a contract. This is a contract that says you, buyer, are going to work with me only for the next 3 months to find a single family home. They can then call another agent and say, hey, I'm working with this agent as single family homes, but I'm also looking for 2 family homes. So Roseanne, I'm going to sign a contract with you. You find me a 2-family or multifamily. I'm also looking for land. So I can go to another client and say, Natasha, I'm going to sign an exclusive right to represent for you. You're looking for land. So I'm looking to buy a single family, land, and a multifamily. I can work with multiple agents to sign different contracts. If Natasha finds me a single family home, Roseanne says, wait a minute, I have a contract. You're supposed to use single family homes with me. So Natasha is instructed to only look for land, right? You're signing a contract with another agent, with an agent for that. Usually when you're doing an exclusive right to represent, there's little boxes. So you're searching for land, multifamily. I like to check them all. I like to check all the boxes that says you're working for me, because not everybody that looks for a single family home ends up with a single family home. Sometimes while they're looking, they say, you know what? Let's look at some 2-family homes too, or a 4-family. Now I could live in one apartment and get some rent, income producing property. That's a good idea. And you know what? I may want to build. Let's look for some land too. I'd want to be the only agent, wouldn't you? Or would you like them working with 2 or 3 other people? I think I want to be the only one. So I'm going to make sure that I'm representing that client in all areas. The exclusive buyer agency and non-exclusive, they're non-existent. They're on here because the guy who wrote the book put them in there, but the only one that really holds any water is exclusive right to represent. Okay, that's the contract between the buyer and the agent that says, I'm going to represent you as a buyer's agent for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or indefinitely, no end date until I find you a house. Okay. Great. What else do we have? Oh, sorry. So compensation. Compensation that's getting paid. There are different ways to get paid. Either the seller can pay you, which is how it usually works. Now, there is a class action suit against a couple of the largest real estate companies in the nation currently going on with the Department of Justice. Class action suit, because people are saying, don't worry, buyer, you're not paying me. The seller's going to pay me. And so they were implying that the seller is paying the buyer's agent. The seller is not paying the buyer's agent. Keep in mind, that's not how it works. The seller isn't paying you. The seller is paying the listing agent. The listing agent is giving you some of their commission. So the listing agent is compensating you, not the seller. There's a big difference. Does everybody understand that?
Say
Remember
that again, please.
description? Let's go back to my whiteboard. See if it's still there. Still there. Remember that? Shirley isn't giving half the money to Natasha and half the money to Joe. Shirley's paying Natasha the whole commission. Natasha's the one who's giving Joe's brokerage some money. Okay? Don't ever say, don't worry, you don't have to pay me, buyer. The seller's going to pay me. The seller's not paying you. That is an illegal thing to say. Don't say it that way. The seller's agent is going to give me a finder's fee. So you don't owe me any money. I'm going to get paid by the other agent is going to share their commission with me. Don't ever say, don't worry, buyer, you don't have to pay me. The seller pays my commission. Don't say that. There's literally a class action suit, and like every brokerage is going to owe a fortune if it goes the wrong direction. So right now, the National Association of Realtors has stepped in to try and save the day on that one. All right, so there you can get paid by the seller as the listing agent. As the buyer's agent, you can get paid by the buyer. Both, you can get paid by the buyer and paid by that listing agent. The selling agent can pay you as well. You can work with a buyer and say, look, buyer, I get 3% commission. No matter what the seller side offers, I get 3%. So if they only offer out, and we saw that listing before, 1.25%, you're going to owe me another 1.75%, buyer. You're allowed to get paid from both parties as long as they agree. As long as the people that you work for agree that you're getting paid from both sides, it's not illegal. It's only illegal if you don't inform, like you're telling your buyer, you're going to pay me 1% for me to find you a house. If they're not aware that the listing agent is going to be giving you money too, that's illegal. But as long as your client knows that two parties are going to pay you, it's not illegal. Okay? They need to know where it's coming from. So either the seller side pays you, the buyer pays you, both the buyer side and the seller side are going to pay you, as long as the person you work for is aware that you're getting paid from both. It's not illegal. It's not uncommon to get paid and ask your buyer to pay you. Not illegal. And it's not uncommon. Why do we want my buyer to pay me? Because buyer, don't you want me to find any house for you? Or do you want me to only find homes that are going to pay commissions? You want me to find anything. If we're driving down the street and you go, oh, look at that blue house. I want that house. I'm going to knock on the door. Hey, seller or owner, I got somebody really wants your house. I'm not looking to sell. Well, he's willing to give you 700,000 for the house. I'm selling. That guy's not going to pay you anything. Your buyer needs to have made you an agreement that they're going to pay you. How about a for sale by owner? For sale by owner is listing a for sale by owner because he doesn't want to pay a commission. And a buyer says, I want you to show me everything. Hey, there's a for sale by owner on Cherry Street, Joe. I want to go see it. You're going to call up the for sale by owner and go, hi, Mr. For sale by owner. Can I take my buyer through here and see the house? Yeah, sure. I'm not paying any commissions out. I didn't ask you for any money. My buyer wants to see your house. They just don't want to do it on their own. Great. If your buyer's not paying you, you like working for free? I don't know. I really don't. I don't like working for free. When I want to work for free, I go to a soup kitchen and I feed homeless people. Then I'll work for free. Somebody needs help doing something, I'll work for free. In the real estate business, I want to get paid. Right? So you can charge your buyer. It's not illegal to charge your buyer. Okay? Buyer agency agreements. A broker can also represent a buyer on a single property. A broker doesn't have to reveal the property's location until an agreement is signed. Okay? You can represent a buyer on a property, and I'm not going to tell you where it is until you sign the contract. I happen to know that there's a property that fits your description, exactly what you want, Mr. Buyer. You're my agent. Tell me where it is. Well, I need you to sign a contract that you're going to pay me, or I'm not going to tell you. Do you know why? If I tell them, ooh, there's a great for sale by owner on Cherry Street, you know what they're going to do the minute I drop them off? They're going to go there themselves and knock on the door themselves. Right? I want to make sure I get paid. When I work with somebody, I want to make sure I'm going to get paid. And will people cheat you out of commission? If they can, they will. You know why? Because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. If somebody doesn't have something in writing that they got to pay you a commission and they can save 20,000 bucks, going to take me in the for sale by owner anyway. I'm not going to tell, I'm just going to go there. If you have an agreement, exclusive right to represent, and that buyer went to the for sale by owner, knocked on the door and bought a house. Hey, Joe, I bought a house. Great. Which one did you buy? I found a for sale by owner on Cherry Street. Great. I'm still getting paid. I have a contract. You owe me money. So everybody see how this works? We don't like working for free. Free's not fun. Anybody want to work for free? If you do, go ask your employer tomorrow morning and just say, when you go to work tomorrow, tomorrow's Friday? Yes, tomorrow. You're going to go to work tomorrow and you're going to walk in and say, boss, you don't owe me any money today. I'm working for you for nothing. Anybody want to do that? Anybody interested in doing that? Well, when somebody asks you to do me a favor in the real estate world, that's what they're asking you to do. I was a contractor for 35 years. People are like, oh, can't you just do that for me? When have you ever gone to work and said, hey, boss, I'm going to just work for nothing today? Anybody ever did that? Anybody ever walk into their job and say, I'm working for free today. Don't worry, take me off the books. I'm not charging you. I just love you guys so much. Kids, sorry, no diapers. Kids, sorry, no food. I work for free today. I'm exaggerating, but that's exactly what's happening. All right, let's see what else we got here. The end. I love that. That's my favorite slide. Okay. Questions, comments on agency. We're not talking about agency. Let me, I'll keep recording for a little bit longer. We're not talking about agency anymore after tonight, although it's going to come up in many of the other chapters. So we need to know about agency and feel really comfortable about it. How do we feel about agency tonight? Pretty good. I'm totally lost, but I was afraid to ask questions. We could do that. You could text me. I mean, you could send me a private message. I won't say who it is, and I'll read the question. Somebody did ask me a question before.
I just want to ask a question.
Go ahead.
So I'm kind of confused about compensating buyer's agent. You say the seller pay fee and buyer pay fee. When you mean the agents, it means agents is the broker, right?
Correct.
Yeah. okay.
Correct. The broker, yes. Agents don't get any money. You're only allowed to receive money from your broker.
Okay.
Remember that? All
Okay.
checks got my name on it.
Okay.
If
Got
you
it.
work for Keller Williams, no check's going to say your name that's at a closing. It's going to say Keller Williams Realty. If you work for
Okay.
Coldwell Banker, not one check is going to have your name on it, even though they were all your listings. At the closing, that check's going to say Coldwell Banker, not you.
Okay.
So
Alright.
we,
Broker's gonna
the-
pay.
so we, the real estate salesperson are the sub-agents and the broker is the
Sub-agents.
agent.
Is the agent, correct? So
Okay.
I'm the one getting paid, and then I'm paying you for generating income. Right? And where does the money come from? Remember, nobody gets a penny, not one penny is made in the real estate office until somebody sells something. No sales, no money. That's how it works. No sales, no money. If nobody sells anything and we just come to work and they sit in the office and everybody's playing real estate and we're going to do a class and nobody does anything and nobody sells anything, nobody makes any money. Not the agent, not the broker. And then they shut the lights off. Right? Because nobody's generating income. All right. So agency. Any
Okay, and really
questions?
quick though, Joe, sorry.
I'm sorry?
So also with that though, like on the MLS, you know how it shows the compensation splits, like what buyer's agents get, whatever broker agents get.
Right.
That's why you don't really want to take anything under than 3, right? Like a lot of brokerages have a like thing where,
minimum.
yeah, a minimum, thank you.
Yeah. But that's
Where you're
each
not-
brokerage.
So you can choose though, like which listings you want to take them, because if you see on the
Yeah.
MLS that there's only like a 1.5 commission fee, then you can be like,
All right. So let me ask you a question. This is a great question. Reese, great question. So now you're shopping with your client and one house, which is totally perfect for them, but they're only offering out a 1% commission. This one over here, which is not as nice as that one, is offering out 3% commission. Which one are you going to show them?
the one with the 3% commission.
Right. So now let me ask you another question. If you're their agent, you're supposed to be working in their best interest, not yours. Whose interest is it to show them the 3% and not the 1%?
Yours.
Agent.
You're acting in your best interest, not theirs. Right? That's a violation of your fiduciary duty.
Okay.
Does it happen? All day, every day. You're going to make 30,000 on this one, 10,000 on that one. Which one am I going to sell them on? That's where your moral obligation comes in,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
It should be, I'm going to do the best job for my client regardless. And that's how it's supposed to be. That's a fiduciary. That's the whole point of being a fiduciary, is you're not working in your best interest. You're working in their best interest. In your best interest, of course, I'm going to look for all their listings that are showing 2 3/4 and 3% finder fee, buyer agent compensation.
I have
Right?
a question.
Anything that's like less than 2%, not even going to look at it. Not even interested. Oh, no, not available. Number one, that's dishonest. So you're supposed to be honest and trustworthy, Boy Scout, and you're not working in their best interest. But you'll find across the board, agents do that all day, every day. All right, who else had a question? I'm sorry.
Dane?
Yes, sir.
So, we went over a lot of disclosures. So like around how many disclosures do we give the customer?
The customer,
Yeah. So yeah, you're the
because we
buyer.
had seller and buyer
Yeah,
clients.
the buyer.
The customer just needs to know whether you're representing them or the seller. Right? So if you're
Mhm.
working and you're listing property, a buyer that's unrepresented, that's a customer, they need to know
Yeah.
you're not representing them, they're representing the seller. But if they're buying a house built before 1978, they still have to sign a lead disclosure, and
Mhm.
fair housing is everybody. Everybody signs fair housing, not
Okay.
commercial. There's a word in that, it's called fair housing. If I'm buying a shopping center, is that housing? No,
No.
we still can't discriminate. but we don't have to sign a fair housing disclosure if I'm selling a shopping center. A shopping center is not housing. It's really made for housing. Okay, that's the point. Because if I'm selling my office building, I don't care who buys it. Could care less. That doesn't come into play. People with money could care less. Housing affects everybody differently. That's when people will discriminate. So you can, I watched this thing the other day, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but it was just, I thought it was pretty funny. This guy had we welcome everybody into the country. We don't discriminate, right? So this guy was walking around and he said, so you think it's a great idea that we got all these immigrants coming in? He said, oh, it's a great idea. And he said, okay, good. And these three guys get out of the car, and they were like Americans, but they were dressed up like they were like people who just refugees that just snuck in from the southern border. He goes, okay, so Pedro and Luis and Mario, they're going to stay in your house. Thanks a lot. Here's the medication for Mario. He gets medication 3 times a day. And, good luck. And the guy goes, oh, they can't live in my house. It's like, what are you talking about? You just said we welcome everybody. He says, well, yeah, but not in my house. Right. So people are different when it comes to their neighborhood and where they live. Commercial real estate, nobody cares. You're selling a shopping center and Kane, you want to buy it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what color you are. Nobody cares what language you are. Everybody, I just want my $3 million for my building. I don't care who buys. Nobody really, it doesn't come into play that much. When it comes into play is when people like, wait, I don't want somebody living next to me or whatever. That's when you find it most. So fair housing, we'll talk about that. It's a really interesting chapter. And there's 6 hours of fair housing. So get ready for that one.
So that's only so the fair housing is for everybody, even if they have like a commercial, like if they're trying to buy like a commercial property.
Yeah, well, it's not required. I'm going to stop recording.